Happy Pride, everyone! Oh, wait, it's not June anymore. Oh well. Every month is a reason to celebrate your pride, right? Anyways, I'm back once again to watch 20 anime. Last year, the amount of support for the video was unmatched, and I appreciate how many of you were so comfortable and encouraging with me talking about the things I did, despite me only being an ally to the community. Even though very few people complained, this year I wanted to strive to deliver an even better video to all of you. And so I recruited the extremely talented, great media analyst, Chloe Sunflora. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Chloe Sunflora. I'm an Australian trans woman who's been making videos on and off for the last 4 years now on my own channel. Initially talking about a range of different media in regards to my own journey as a trans woman, and later on my whole journey as a person in general in transition. But as of late, I've stumbled back into my first love above all else, talking about anime, manga, and what have you in Japanese culture, and how much I absolutely love it to an obviously neurodivergent degree. First of all, by discussing the anime Revolutionary Girl Utena and its entire collective work as a franchise. From there, I've done retrospective looks in a similar vein on series like K-On!, Fullmetal Alchemist 2003, and as of recently, Higurashi When They Cry. And Hunter must have found something in those hours upon hours of me talking at length, because he's brought me on today to give a queer perspective to this year's video on a whole bunch of anime which revolves around the many differing aspects of being queer from both your suggestions as well as ones that he didn't cover in his previous video.
Similarly to last year's video, I'll be giving small reviews for the shows, as well as providing some small analysis. As always, there will be content warnings for those that need them, because I don't want anyone to get into a show that has stuff they might not like in it. If the show has multiple seasons, we will again only be watching the first season of every show. However, unlike last year's video, there will be no rating of representation this time around. Instead, Chloe will be giving some amazing insight into these shows from the lens of someone in the community.
Full disclosure, a lot of these were first look throughs for me as well. As much as I love myself some queer anime, I fully admit I've not seen every queer anime underneath the sun. Heresy, I know. Either way, this is going to be an interesting time for all involved, especially given what we have before us today is quite the mixed bag of sorts.
Before we get into it, these are just our opinions. If you have love or hate for some of these shows, that's fantastic. Everyone is entitled to their own thoughts on media. Just make sure not to harass anyone over what you may believe. Also, one last thing before we get into the video, and this may be a little bit more serious than many of you expect. I know this year has been scary for many of you. The world as we know it around us is changing rapidly, and absolutely not for the better. No matter what happens, my channel and my community will always be a safe place for those of you that need it. You are seen, you are loved, and you are accepted. I hope that all of you watching this video manage to have a good pride regardless, and a good year despite the challenges you may face. Anyways, to ease the mood some, talk about some less serious stuff, we will talk about a really amazing show, Zombieland Saga. Sakura Minamoto aspires to be an idol just like those that she looks up to, and on the first day of her second year at high school, she plans to apply for a local idol audition. That aspiration ends very quickly when she's hit and killed by a truck right outside of her house gate. She doesn't get isekai'd though. Instead, 10 years after her death, she finds herself in a mansion brought back to life as a zombie, along with 6 other girls from different periods in time. Kotaro Tatsumi is the mysterious man who brought all of them back to life, with one goal in mind: revitalize Saga through the power of an idol group. With Kotaro as their manager, they begin going to events and taking on jobs around town, while the girls embrace their new lives as they gradually remember or explore their life before death. Hearing that it's an idol anime may turn some people away, but I beg you, right now, please, reconsider. Zombieland Saga has a lot to offer its viewers. Because of all the girls coming from distinctly different periods of time, it's very easy to latch onto and appreciate every single character in the show. Saki is a rambunctious, vulgar biker gang leader from the late 90s who wants to take over the country, opting to do so through idol culture. Lily is a child actress from the late 90s who is happy to live a life on stage instead of on TV again. Yugiri is a courtesan from the 1880s, and despite being 2 centuries behind, is eager to learn a lot about the new world and to provide entertainment in a different way. Ai is an idol from the late 2000s, while Junko is an idol from the early 80s, also known as the golden age of idols. Both characters provide very important different perspectives on what it means to be an idol and the culture behind it. And then we have Tai, who does a really great impression of a chicken. Despite how wildly different every character's backgrounds are, they all provide unique perspectives on what it means to be an entertainer, what being an idol can do for people and their happiness, as well as the responsibility that comes with this role. The writer Shigeru Murakoshi and the producer Nobuhiro Takenaka set out with the goal to redefine what it means to be an idol, and I think they've been doing a great job. I also really enjoy how delicately they handle some of the characters' backgrounds, like Lily as an example. Spoilers here, although the show's kinda old, so maybe this isn't a spoiler. Lily is transgender, and because of this, they wanted to make sure they were considerate to trans people both through her character and the response from the other idols to finding this out. This love for character writing can be felt in every single one of the cast. I think it just affirms how great of a show this really is. Plus, it's no mystery that I love Steins Gate. And the seiyuu for Okabe, Miyano Mamoru, also known for voicing Light Yagami from Death Note, Dazai from Bungo Stray Dogs, Death the Kid from Soul Eater, Tamaki from Ouran High School Host Club, and so many more. This guy is practically everywhere. He kills it in this show. He is clearly having so much fun with this role, and every time he's on screen, it's impossible not to laugh.
佐賀の人口は
そんな少数点以下までわかるわい。
早く言ってよ。
少なめ。
は？
Even if he is a bit abrasive or an asshole,
知るかそんなもんボケー。
their dynamics provide for genuinely fun and hilarious moments. Like, I love how at one point they just get struck by lightning and then continue to perform anyways. Can you imagine being an audience member and almost being traumatized because you watched an entire group die on stage, but instead you go home and are like, yeah, that was sick. You know, you don't question why they all died but just kept going. Whatever, you know, power to them. Slay queens. However, the show isn't afraid of exploring topics that might not be as lighthearted as the show progresses. We would get to learn more about what each character's life was like before they tragically passed. All of them pretty much at a young age, mind you, which pulls the curtain back on many subjects: entertainment exploitation, gang fighting, self-doubt and self-loathing, gender identity, overworking, and many more. Yes, this show can be quite funny, but there were a few times I found myself crying while watching the show. Not only are the characters amazing, but so are the visuals. Despite coming out nearly 10 years ago, everything in Zombieland Saga looks clean and fresh. I would have preferred the performances not to be in 3D, but I think at the time this show came out, something like this was kind of unavoidable. Mappa clearly loved Zombieland Saga in every other regard. The big question left then is, for a show about music, was the music good? Absolutely. If you've been watching this channel for some time, you know that I love when the cast sings any of the songs in a show, like Bocchi the Rock or K-On! And Zombieland Saga fed me well. Throughout the runtime of the show, the group performs 9 original songs, and they made an original song for both the opening and the ending, all of which sound amazing, 2 of which are really emotional songs. They cooked. Let them cook again. All of this is thanks to collaboration between Mappa, a studio I'm sure I don't need to explain given their run as of late with the industry, for better or for worse. Cygames, creators of Princess Reconnect, Redive, Pretty Derby. Hello. Quick pause to the video. This is Hunter from the future. This video is 2 months late, as I'm sure you might realize, and I think it's very funny that this was recorded before Pretty Derby got its global release and became a global sensation. Just wanted to say that. And Grand Blue Fantasy, and Avex Pictures and Dugout, 2 companies who make music. These groups came together and decided to make this anime. Yeah, Zombieland Saga is completely anime original, which is even more insane given that there is a 2nd season with a movie coming later this year on top of live performances by the entire group role-playing their characters. It's clearly building quite the legacy for itself, and I'm really glad that these guys got together and made this happen. Zombieland Saga is a series that has been getting more love as time goes on, and has paved the way for a lot of series like Oshinoko to be as respected as they are. If we never got Zombieland Saga, I'm not sure idol culture would be as tolerated in the West as it is today. This anime is getting a firm 8 out of 10 overall, and I'm very excited to watch the rest of the series. I gotta really be prepared for when that movie drops. As for representation, there is a character in the show, as I mentioned, that is transgender, and she is done super respectfully and delicately, which is very surprising given the show aired in 2018, back when the topic was more dicey, especially so in Japan. Her episode honestly had me crying at several points, but I'll pass things over to Chloe to talk about her thoughts on Zombieland Saga.
So let's get this out of the way first. Yes, this is where the infamous image of Lily Hoshikawa telling TERFs to shut up came from and was used famously in UK courts surrounding gender reform. But to say that is all the legacy of Zombieland Saga and Lily as a character is honestly really underselling the series itself and her impact as a transgender character in anime, in my honest opinion. First off, Lily's entire representation is one that was made in an era which was, at the time it came out in, very much trying to distance itself from what came before for showing off transgender or even gender non-conforming characters in the medium. As while we will get to talking more about the lesbian and gay representation more on this video later on, it needs to be said that the positive representation we see from them has always kind of been more the norm compared to those on the gender identity specific part of the spectrum, especially for those where it was seen as more comedic and as a general punchline for wacky characters more than anything. For examples here, you can see Ryuji Fujioka and Yujiro Shiratori as two main examples for this in the 2000s and 2010s respectively. And while we did have some generally good showings of it in positive lights thanks in part to Wandering Sun becoming popular both in those times as well, I'd argue that it wasn't until Lily came onto our screens that we had it shown not just in a positive light, but shown in a way that captivated the audience on a scale of which it couldn't be ignored. As Zombieland Saga focuses highly on the truth that a lot of transgender folk go through when they're at that stage Lily was before her untimely death. The reality of going through a puberty you do not feel comfortable going through and the nightmare of experiencing gender dysphoria at such a young age and feeling helpless about it, while at the same time using it as kind of a black comedy over her not having to deal with it being dead now. Part and parcel of that as well is how she was treated by her father, who is more or less part of the reason for her demise due to how strictly he treats her before her passing, as she was a child entertainer before her death, which leads her to the team of friend Chocho in the first place. But her reality in life is one many trans folk have to live with growing up, either through strict conservative households who hold the negative viewpoints on queerness, or straight up strict rulings on what they can and can't do. And finally, the acceptance of her in story and outside of it is one of the more wholesome things for trans representation for a character like Lily as well, as her coming out to the group as being a trans woman is greeted by her being accepted wholeheartedly by the members of Friend Chocho. Given that this was something of which was always seen as something that needed to be earned or fought for by other trans or gender non-conforming characters until this point, was so easily obtainable to her was arguably a sign of the changing tides of how trans characters could be handled. This attitude is also seen in how Lily has been accepted by the wider audience both within the anime-loving mediums as much as it is outside of it, as Lily as a character and a positive showing of representation was shown proudly, to the point that she was given the title of Best Girl of 2018 by Crunchyroll, and even used as an example in Lucy J. Miller's book Distancing Representations in Transgender Film, where in it she actually praises Lily's representation as being more than just a crossdresser like the aforementioned Ryuji and Yujiro, while also speaking out towards the truth and reality of transgender youth, which, until that point, hadn't been focused on as much as in regards to the trauma surrounding puberty. Not only that, but since her establishment as a character in Zombieland Saga, it's arguable she opened up the floodgates for more characters and other mediums to be shown in similar light, as a few years down the track, we'd have characters like Bridget and Guilty Gear finally get confirmation that she is indeed a trans woman, and even big name shonen like My Hero Academia showing off a trans masc and trans feminine characters in its ranks in Tiger and Magne in their own rights. So for all of that and more, Lily Hoshikawa is our eternal best zombie girl and a shining star for trans representation.
One of the most requested shows in the comment section on last year's video was Strawberry Panic, so naturally I made sure to prioritize watching this. Nagisa Aoi transfers into the Saint Mediator Girls Academy, one of 3 prestigious all-girl Christian schools that attend Strawberry Hall on the wealthy and historic Astria Hill. She gets flustered and lost quickly on her first day, and bumps into a mysterious silver-haired student that enchants her so heavily she ends up in the infirmary. Later she finds out that she is the étoile of the school, étoile being French for a star. She embarks on her school journey with her roommate Tamao Suzumi as she learns about the different schools, their culture, and who the étoile is. Coming out in 2006, Strawberry Panic is often regarded as one of the pillars of Yuri anime alongside Revolutionary Girl Utena and Maria Watches Over Us, the latter of which we'll talk about later in this video. A lot of tropes you see nowadays in various different shows are extremely common in this one, likely because they may have come from it. Let's take the 2 characters in the main romance as an example, Nagisa and Shizuma. One is tall, mature acting, long hair, and older with a backstory you learn about throughout the season, whilst the other is slightly younger, shorter in height, and short hair, also quite energetic. These descriptions could be applied to the leads and a lot of Yuri anime, and although they are unfortunate examples, the ones that immediately come to my mind are Citrus and Valkyrie Drive Mermaid from last year's video. Speaking of things that are unfortunate, sorry guys. As much as it pains me to say this, given how much it was recommended, I think this show has aged really poorly.
So, apologies to a good friend of mine, Jazzy Oliver, with whom this is her first Yuri anime when she first started watching anime a decade ago, but I unfortunately have to be the one to say to her and all of the people recommending this to Hunter in his last video on the subject, this show is absolutely not what people were hyping it up to be.
Let's take the main romance as an example again. They're really hard to root for. A lot of our introductions to Shizuma are her making a myriad of unprompted and uncomforting advances on people in the school that don't seem to really want that to happen. One of the first scenes we get of Nagisa and Shizuma together is Shizuma making an unprompted advancement, Nagisa going, "No, please don't," and then Shizuma going, "There's nothing to be afraid of," and then proceeding with the advancements. That sounds pretty bad, right? Another example that happens later in the season is that Shizuma tries to make an advancement, Nagisa pushes her away again, and then Shizuma pins her to a bed and makes sexual advances on her. Nagisa didn't consent. She clearly doesn't want this, and Shizuma does end up hesitating, but not because she realizes that she's about to commit a crime. It's because she remembers her previous partner. When she hesitates, Nagisa slips out from under her and quickly runs away from her. We're supposed to root for these two? It's because of this that the chemistry between the two is rather unbelievable. I mean, how are we supposed to believe two people love each other when the beginning of their romance was someone making unconsenting advancements and the other person begging them to stop or running away from them? Of course, as the season progresses, these moments begin to stop and Shizuma starts to become a more tolerable character to watch. They do end up having a lot of very cute moments together, and the romance begins to develop a bit, but it's not that great for two reasons. The first is that the romance begins to develop and the weird moments go to the side only around episode 17 or so, which is over halfway through the series. And the second is that these weird bits with Shizuma never truly leave. Near the end of the show, Shizuma makes another advancement on a different character that results in her getting slapped and makes the other character fucking cry, with Shizuma claiming that she was only choking her. Who the fuck kisses someone on the mouth while holding their hands back as a joke? Hello? I don't do that with my friends. Do you?
I could parrot a lot of what Hunter has already mentioned about the previously mentioned sexual assault for no reason other than potential shock value, or even the fact that the main duo's relationship is one of the most problematic of its time, or hell, talk about how it uses birth in such a way that it makes the series such a slog to work through, unless you truly enjoy yourself some more toxic in your toxic Yuri.
Nagisa's roommate, Tamao, was honestly a much better pick for the romance in the show. Let me get it out of the way quickly though, that she also has some weird moments. Like the first time she meets Nagisa, she gets all of her measurements under the guise of it being for a school uniform, but in reality she just wanted to know for herself. There are some others, she's kind of a freak sometimes, but they're very minimal compared to Shizuma. With Tamao, not only are they closer in age, but throughout the show, she shows genuine care for Nagisa. She takes care of her when she's scared or can't sleep well. She makes food for her and takes her to locations that are meaningful to Tamao. She helps her with studies and so much more. The chemistry between the two of them was palpable. But for whatever reason, I mean, she had blue hair, so I guess by anime standards, she was never going to win this race. Shout out to all my blue-haired girls losing their romances, bro. Happens way too frequently. Let a blue-haired girl win. Are there other romances in the show, you may ask? Yes, there are. In fact, there are actually a pretty sizable amount of love triangles. We have our main set of characters, and then we have our side characters, but those side characters also have side characters, and those side characters have side characters too. And all of them, for the most part, are interested in girls to some degree. A lot of the romance interests are hard to follow because they're given very little screen time, but one that gets a lot of development, arguably more screen time than the romance between Shizuma and Nagisa, is between Amane and Hikari. Hikari and Amane are easily, hands down, the best couple in the show. Their chemistry is immediately obvious from the moment we're introduced to them. The two of them never have any weird moments and always respect each other. Wait, this sounds really good, right? And it is. It definitely is. But the thing that really drags it down is the giant love rectangle that they're in. Hikari is in love with Amane, right? But there's a girl named Yaya who is Hikari's roommate and is in love with her. And then there's a girl named Kenjo who is like in fake love with Hikari, but also in probably real love with Amane. Amane is from another one of the schools on Astria Hill named Spica, or Spica. I'm not really sure which one it is. And since this is Shizuma's last year in Strawberry Hall, a new étoile needs to be elected. I mentioned it some earlier, but to just further elaborate, étoile is basically societally at the school above the school president. So, Spica or Spica, again, I really don't know, wants Amane to be the new étoile, but they notice that Hikari is a potential obstacle for this to become a reality. Their genius solution is to have Hikari move on from Amane, and they decide to make this happen by having Kenjo assault Hikari in the woods pretty vividly. This doesn't work, so Hikari is assaulted again a few episodes later by the same girl, this time having global warming be explained to her. What? Not, I feel like this was supposed to be a joke maybe, but very strange. The other girl that loves Hikari named Yaya shows up, saves her from Kenjo, and then Hikari goes on a date with Amane, which Yaya knows about. When Hikari gets home from her date with Amane, despite Yaya saving her earlier that episode, and knowing what the girls from Spica have been putting her through, Yaya gives us the most graphic on-screen assault of the entire series. This legit traumatizes Hikari, and she has to stay in another room for a few days. The following episode, we're just supposed to have moved on from this scene and support the two of them becoming friends again. And Hikari is the one who apologizes? How the fuck does this even make sense? So yeah, even if Amane and Hikari are a great couple, the romance is dragged down dramatically and makes episodes focusing on them some of the worst in the entire series because of these people that keep assaulting Hikari. I know this isn't exactly a hot take, but when will we learn that assault should not be a plot point used purely for shock factor, especially in a romance show? So, the romances are pretty dated. Maybe the slice of life school stuff is redeemable? To that, I would say, maybe. I found it pretty boring personally, but I'm sure some people could find enjoyment in these episodes. It was just really hard to focus on them with all of the other stuff going on. It doesn't spend a lot of time focusing on the clubs outside of choir, even if those clubs are interesting. We never really get to see a lot of the class life outside of French class. We even barely get to know much about the other schools. Spica really wants Étoile for some reason, and the other school, Lilium, we barely know a thing about outside of their cosplay club, which actually is a shame because the president of that school, Chikaru, was probably my favorite character in the show.
So, with all of that already accounted for overall, I'd actually want to use this as a comparison piece, as Strawberry Panic is often cited and was even cited by many as Hunter comment section last Pride video as being the starting point of modern Yuri in anime. And I'd have to say that Kanazuki no Miko and Simone would like to have a word on this subject. And while some may potentially argue that Simone has its own problematic aspects in terms of gender going on behind it, maybe some problematic relationships within it as well, I'd argue at least Simone doesn't use sexual assault in the same manner that this series does, and that is already a point in favor of Simone off the bat. But without derailing the subject at hand, it's what I feel needs to be said that while yes, it was certainly the first quote-unquote big Yuri anime of its time, its placement in the canon of modern Yuri anime needs to be reassessed a lot more, with the next one to follow in my opinion being the one which arguably deserves much more praise than this one does.
This series was written by Sakurako Kamino, which I found really funny because she also made Love Live, but the point here is that she is a girl. Putting some of these elements in her story was a weird decision in my opinion, because, and this could just be my cis man viewpoint, I'd feel women would want to build other women up, not make a series full of girls assaulting other girls. I get it if she's bi or a lesbian in real life, and maybe this is a way for her to explore it more in a healthy medium, but I feel like this takes toxic Yuri to another level. The weirder thing to me is that there are sometimes moments this show feels like it inserts fetishes in it. For example, we have girls wearing maid outfits, which, you know, doesn't seem the most harmful on the outside, but then we have a girl who has a sister complex. There's occasional foot shots, like it's a Quentin Tarantino movie, and there's a shower or bathtub scene in pretty much every single episode of the show. I think Kamino managed to do some of the Yuri stuff in Love Live better, even if in that series it's mostly implied. For as much bad stuff that I talked about just now, I don't think that Strawberry Panic itself is bad. As I mentioned, once the romance between Shizuma and Nagisa starts to pick up, even if it takes a long time to do so, it does become a much better show. The last scene of the series is especially sweet. The school politics that it tiptoes around for the most seasons starts to come to the forefront, and once that happens, it's very interesting. A person just needs to have a decent amount of patience to get through a lot of this show, and me personally, I struggled to do that more times than I didn't. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Strawberry Panic is thoroughly a product of its time. Let's contrast this with Maria Watches Over Us, also known as Marimite, one of the aforementioned pillars of Yuri anime. Yumi Fukuzawa bumps into Sachiko Ogasawara, I probably said that wrong, while giving thanks to a statue of the Virgin Mary, or Maria. When they bump into each other, Sachiko fixes her scarf, something that is unheard of from her, as Sachiko is seen as a bit of an idol on campus. The picture ends up being taken, and Tsutako, the photographer, wants to display it at the photography section of the school festival. However, she needs permission from Sachiko. When they seek her out, Yumi finds herself in a situation where Sachiko wants her to be her petite sœur, French for little sister, and this title goes to underclassmen that are chosen as protégé to learn everything from their upperclassmen that chose them, a practice very common in the Lillian Girls Academy. The reason being is that Sachiko will be forced to play Cinderella in a play, unless she can get an understudy, and she can't fathom dancing with a man. Yumi refuses this offer, but when offered the possibility of being able to drop out of the play if Sachiko can make Yumi say yes to this, Sachiko begins a journey to get to know Yumi better so that she can win her over. Despite the similar setting and their similar initial personalities, out the gate we have them meeting in a way that's rather normal, yet still romantic, and realistic character motivations for why they would want to become closer to each other, on top of their personalities being less of caricatures and more grounded. I also found it amusing how both series have one of the two protagonists being voiced by someone who also voiced a Higurashi character. Very in line for this channel.
Well, we're going to leave the bashing of them to the side for the most part for the sake of parody. Also, sir, we're not continuing to beat down a dead horse with this comparison for Marimite. It does need to be said that the two are basically different sides of the coin in the way of their presentation character-wise as they are shown, even down to how much more dignified they are in this version. The character relationships between the main cast, you could cut the sexual tension with a butter knife at times. As Hunter has previously mentioned, the aforementioned sisters terminology doesn't exactly leave much to the imagination for that alone. But aside from all of the quote-unquote interesting incest undertones to the relationship from the jump, it's arguable that the way both Yumi and Sachiko interact with each other all throughout is treated with far much more respect in the 4-season run for the series for the characters themselves as they are for the audience viewing it.
Marimite is a story that clearly takes inspiration from two things: Catholicism, mainly in settings and behaviors, and the Class S subculture. It's a Christian boarding school, and a lot of things in the school take place in front of the statue of Mary on campus, whether it's confessions, prayers, and more. Its Catholic roots make the subtle romantic advances between members of the cast more romantic and daring, as they are breaking potential taboos in the religion, given how hotly debated it is whether same-sex couples are sinning or not.
God hates the gays, or something like that.
The other, Class S, is one many of you may be familiar with, but I'll explain anyways. It's a Japanese subculture from the early 1900s, where friendship between girls tend to have strong emotions and romantic advancements, but oftentimes those friendships just stay friendships, either because of internalized homophobia, graduation from the school, or whatever situation they happen to be in, or, in some cases, they die. Unlike how homosexuality is often treated in Japan, Class S is typically accepted in a way many women and teenagers in Japan for a long time could express their sexuality without it being illegal. Although nowadays, it is seen as kind of outdated and maybe even harmful in media. Marimite is often cited as one of, if not the reason, Class S became popular in Yuri storytelling. Because of its Class S roots, the romance builds in so many small, subtle ways that feel very similar to like Pride and Prejudice, a gentle touch on the shoulder, dancing together in an empty gymnasium, comforting the other in a grain house, putting a necklace on the other, making a small cup of tea, and so many more moments just progress the romance in ways you just would never see coming. Yumi actually liked Sachiko prior to the series starting, so having finally been acknowledged, but just because it'd be convenient for Sachiko, really hurts her. Although she realizes that through acts like these that Sachiko does over and over again, maybe it just isn't for convenience, and that she actually wants to get to know Yumi and have her in her life. Not only is the romance told subtly, but a lot of the story is as well. The big drive for many meaningful moments in plot progression and relationship progression, also thanks to Class S, is meaningful and deep conversations between characters, similar to Season 2 of ReZero and the Monogatari franchise.
This isn't super surprising when you take into account that the writer for all 4 seasons of the show was the legendary writer Reiko Yoshida, who you may know for helping write Silent Voice and Violet Evergarden some years after this, while also being responsible for series such as Chaotic Girls and Panzer, which have some bait-and-switch Yuri antics in both those shows. So good to know she used up all of her good gay writing in this series. I kid, of course. But knowing the pedigree of Yoshida's work also includes this into the mix really does let you know the kind of series that she'd write for the future definitely do have their antics of a more similar nature as Mari Mite within it.
There is a lot of politics in the show too, but maybe not as you'd expect. The main crux of the series is the Yamayuri Council, a group of girls that Sachiko belongs to that govern and make important decisions for the school. Being a part of it and its governing house, the Rose Mansion, essentially sets these girls up with leadership skills and goals for the real world, priming them for success. The way these girls choose their successors is through the Petite Sœur title that I mentioned earlier, meaning that when they graduate, the person under them will become a Rose candidate for the mansion and go to govern the school. Naturally, as you might assume, a lot of drama comes from this house. Campaigning, arguing, playing with each other's surs, and more. We get to explore other members of the house, and many of them are quite likable, with Rei and Yoshino being standouts for me. There's a character named Sei, who starts off a little suspicious, but goes on to have some of the best scenes in the first season. In fact, even if the genre is Class S, Sei is openly a lesbian and has romantic developments throughout the anime, contrary to most of the rest of the cast. There is still a lot to explore with this series' characters, relationships, and politics, as I only watched the first season of 4. As per usual though, I'm only going to watch the first season for this video. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I think it helps that it lacked a bulk of the stuff I didn't like in Strawberry Panic. The art style was charming, it reminded me of anime I'd watched in my childhood. It was just overall a solid watch. All I can hope is that later seasons are as enjoyable as the first, and that there does end up being meaningful progression through their relationships. I'll give Maria's first season an 8 out of 10. Another highly requested watch from last year is Stranger by the Shore, and I gotta say, I'm really glad that it was. Shun Hashimoto lives very far away from home after a falling out with his parents for being gay. Here, he spends his days as a writer, which I'd love to know what he writes, seeing as he must be a Kubrick fan with that 2001 poster. One day, he sees someone on the shore of the beach, who is Mio Chibana, an orphaned high school student. After showing care and concern for Mio, he leaves for a few years to the mainland. One day, now an adult, Mio comes back to the seaside city and confesses his love to Shun. Shun is then tasked with looking inward on himself and his past. Can he accept Mio's feelings? Stranger by the Shore is a movie by Studio Hibari, which, despite the studio not having the craziest catalog, they hold no punches here. This movie is nothing short of stunning. Beautiful beaches, bustling city life, and tranquil depictions of nature on top of very cute cats. It is impossible not to find yourself immediately drawn into the film's atmosphere with how breathtaking most of the movie is. Once you're lured in, the story and its characters have to make sure they can carry their weight too, and I can happily say they do manage to deliver.
I have often seen this film be compared to Studio Ghibli's When Marnie Was There, purely down to the two having eerily similar concepts and having some kind of queer relationship going down in its dynamic. The main thing you need to know going into this is that unlike When Marnie Was There, Stranger by the Shore is actually good. Also, there's not this weird incest plot in there, but let's not stay on that for too long.
Shun has spent most of his adult life neglecting his sexuality or ignoring it because of his parents kicking him out since he was gay. Even while he was in high school, he was teased and made fun of at the possibility of him being gay. All of this, coupled with how society seems to treat gay people in Japan, hammers in for him that who he finds attractive is perceived as not normal, and he wears his guilt for him feeling this way on his sleeve. Once Mio comes and confesses to Shun about his feelings, the movie turns into an exploration of internalized homophobia and evaluating external pressure. Is it okay for a man to love a man? Would it not be a waste? Would the people around them accept them being a couple? Do they necessarily care if society accepts them? Seeing the inner conflict and then the loneliness they feel without each other turning into a lovely relationship with two people who genuinely love each other, it's refreshing. I will point out that there is an age gap. Shun is 27 and Mio is 20. but I feel like that's okay. There was no romantic tension or exploration when Mio was younger, so there's no inklings of grooming or weird material that could be picked out from the greater picture. The two are adults, and they can make adult decisions. I feel so many times with gay or lesbian characters in anime, something weird has to happen. Like, there has to be some sort of fetishization, or typically pedophilia randomly comes into play, or as mentioned with Class S, someone has to die. None of these factors come into play in this movie, and it just revolves around their feelings that only grow every minute that passes in the film. We need to see more stories kind of like this, or adjacent to this in anime. Honestly, in media in general. We don't need to make it weird, or incestual, or pedophilic. Let's not break laws or enter weird, questionable moral ground. Let gay people be gay. Let lesbians be lesbians. And let trans and non-binary people explore their genders.
This is especially a hopeful ask given that this movie was made in 2020 and the original stories that inspired it came out starting in 2014 and are still ongoing to this day, and we've seen a lot more openly queer stories in the media come out more since the release of this adaptation. One could hope that this and others like it could give the genre the jab in the arm that it needs to perhaps be more active in recent times.
Also, massive kudos to the anime for having not only a consensual sex scene, one that seems to be very rare in these types of anime, but one of the most intimate sex scenes I've seen in all of anime. This moment in the movie is to signal how much these two love each other, and how once they have performed this action are ready to ignore how society views them and just love each other. The only thing I'll say, which isn't necessarily the fault of the film, is that it's quite short. Stranger by the Shore comes in at a measly 58 minutes, adapting 4 chapters of source material. There is a sequel manga where the two of them pay Shun's parents a visit, and maybe they could have included that in the adaptation of this film to lengthen the story a little bit. I'm not sure. All I know is that once it was over, I found myself really wanting more. I hope that one day we can get a sequel film, but who knows if that will happen. If you have an hour to spare, go watch this movie. I don't think you'll regret it. Stranger by the Shore will be getting a strong 9 out of 10. Then we watched Blue Period. Yatsuro Yaguchi is a guy who appears rough around the edges. He goes out late, parties with his friends, smokes, but despite these stereotypical bad traits, when it comes to school he works extremely hard to be a top student. Even though he has stellar grades and a bustling social life, he's complacent with where his future goes. He lacks passion for anything in his life, and most things feel superficial to him. He's aware of this, and so are those around him. But it never bugs him until one day, after coming to get his pack of smokes from the art room, he sees a painting that stops him dead in his tracks. As he studies the painting, he begins to wonder how someone could make something like this at their age. With the painting still in mind, after partying late with his friends, he notices that the atmosphere of Shibuya in his eyes is truly beautiful. The blue of the sky and the horizon next to the tall buildings sticks in his head all day. He finds the person who made the painting, Maru Mori, and shockingly, he feels incredibly understood by her when he talks about Shibuya's beauty. After seeing the painting, reflecting on himself, and talking to Maru, despite always falling asleep or slacking off in art class, he decides to recreate what he saw. Once his friends realize what he was trying to paint, he feels that flush of superficiality leave his body, having a real conversation and feeling truly fulfilled. After this, he would go on to explore this feeling, hoping to keep having real moments with people, and he goes against his better judgment, chasing his newfound passion as a career being an artist. Around the midpoint of quarantine when this anime was coming out, Blue Period was a show that I heard an absurd amount of buzz for, and I happened to be kind of in a contrarian mindset at the time, so because of that, I avoided the show. I feel like very quickly the show fell out of the public eye, and having finally watched it, I'm surprised it isn't more talked about. I was absolutely blown away. It's no secret on my channel that I am doing my best to pursue art as a career, having a focus on filmmaking. Last year, I watched Look Back, a movie that had an extreme impact on me that I've been working into a video on the side to express. And Blue Period felt like the perfect addendum for how that movie affected me. I feel in our day and age, people are lost. I'm sure you may have heard you can be whatever you want when you grow up, but rarely does that ever actually feel true. College is expensive, and some will purposely weed you out. Many subjects require lifelong dedication to. As of late, we have lots of defunding going on for colleges and scholarships and financial aid, and sometimes you're just told that what you want to pursue isn't worth pursuing. You can be whatever you want to be, but that whatever needs to make you a lot of money, otherwise you may be struggling. Our generation isn't really taught to pursue our passions anymore, especially with the recent developments of generative AI and ChatGPT. It's because of this that where Yatsura starts in the story is a place that many people can relate to. He works hard, but he doesn't ever feel like he has a genuine moment with people, even his best friends. Yet once he finds a spark, he chases it, and it inspires him to uncover who he is. Discovering his passions ignites the people around him to do the same, and I'm sure it can inspire one of you watching this video. Everyone has that one moment where they're walking through a museum, or they're watching a show, or a movie, or they're talking to people, and then all of a sudden it clicks, and they find something they want to chase. Whether it's being a doctor, or it's being a paleontologist, or a geologist, or an artist, everyone has something that means something to them. And Blue Period is for those people with passion, even if they aren't aware what they are yet.
While my own experience in pursuing passions outside of video making may differ in regards to Hunter, as outside of making videos like this one, I'm attempting to be a professional voice actor in my own time as well. Let's do this. And manage some semblance of a social life alongside everything else. In a similar vein to generative AI becoming the supposed boogeyman for artists, it's a very similar vein towards voiceover as well. Which is to say, Blue Period strikes a chord for me on certain levels, even on different wavelengths. As a creative in regards to writing in both video essays and even stories of my own, as a queer woman with how it broaches the subjects of identity even on a subtle-ish level, and especially as an overly ambitious voice actor who's admittedly guilty of not feeling good enough at what she does despite loving it so much.
Blue Period talks a lot about many things that a large number of people will find relatable, no matter what field they're in. For example, the battle of natural talent versus hard work. Who would win? Some people are born inherently talented and gifted at a certain craft. Maybe sometimes that person is born exactly into the spot that they need to be in to foster their growth, like perhaps they're well off financially, or someone they know is in a field that they want to go into. Other people are born in spots that aren't as fortunate, or with virtually no talent in something. Yet with hard work, that person can reach for heights that may not have seemed possible otherwise. This is portrayed in the show between Yatsura and Takahashi, a friendship but more of a rivalry. Even if Takahashi is initially gifted in art, Yatsura develops practically a hyperfixation for the craft and works so religiously that his pieces improve dramatically over a short amount of time. Another is the perception of society and how it may perceive art. 9 times out of 10, if you wanted to pursue a career in some form of art, as I talked a bit about before, I guarantee one of or both of your parents will tell you it doesn't make any money, or it's not worth it, or to go for something more realistic. Art is often painted as something for dreamers. By that I mean, it doesn't happen. The path to being a creative is a long and painful one, full of sacrifices, days with little to no sleep, pain, blood, sweat and tears, lack of free time, and straining social relationships. And oftentimes, it can take a long time before you see the fruit of your labor. Sometimes, it may not even be while you're alive. As you can imagine, one of the initial hurdles in the show is Yatsura's parents not approving of what he wants to do. It's through his hard work and artwork that his parents see not only how he's super serious about this, but also how it helps him view the world and come to understand them more. They end up giving him the support he needs, but this support doesn't always happen for everyone in creative fields. Although, piggybacking off of that, another thing that Blue Period does is show how artists communicate with each other and the world around them. Sometimes you are accepted and loved. Other times you are shut out. Sometimes you live in the shadow of someone else. Sometimes you wish for nothing but the best for those around you. All these are things that can be depicted through art. Artists like Maki, Yuka, Maru, and Hashida inspire Yatsura to create in new ways and to explore new parts of himself through his art. And in turn, his pieces are interpreted and inspire those people. It's a beautiful thing to watch, as they are essentially creating a cycle of constant self-improvement for themselves and encouragement for those around them.
Once again bringing back up Reiko Yoshida as the writer here for this series, I want to highlight the journey that Yatsura goes through is similar in vein to another character that Yoshida helped write for in Yui Hirasawa from K-On!, who went on a similar character arc of going from having no real skill at guitar or being able to sing to being the lead guitarist and vocalist of a band by the end of the series run. Now, the comparison between the two are from starkly different series in tone and subject matter. This is true, but I bring it up because it feels like no matter where you go, anime like this are made to inspire those who watch them, and the fact we are still getting such works which could help those overcome their own anxieties regarding their creative talents is just genuinely so great to see even to this day.
Blue Period doesn't shy away from some darker topics either. Overworking or self-harm, depression and suicidal thoughts, familial pressure, identity exploration, and finding your sexuality are all topics openly discussed or featured in Blue Period, and are all given respect and care that they deserve. I found myself getting emotional at various points through the show because I either saw myself in some of the characters, or I saw people that I love in them. It was a truly unforgettable watch, and I wish we'd get another season sometime soon because I want to see so much more of this series. I do have one complaint with the show, although it is fairly minor. It's clear that the studio chosen to adapt this into anime, 7 arcs, might not have been the right choice. There are many times where the animation feels stiff or inconsistent, and it doesn't shy away from randomly including very obvious CGI objects or scenery. When they need to lock in during an important or emotional scene, they do, but I could see a lot of instances of animation and inconsistency being immersion breakers for some people. Outside of this, it's great. If you are a creative or you have a passion or a hobby that you love, you will find something to enjoy in Blue Period. I guarantee it. I'll be giving the anime a strong 9 out of 10.
Anyone can cook, but only the fearless can be great.
With that out of the way though, some of you may be wondering how this fell into the criteria for this video. And that is because of Yuka, one of the main characters in the show. Yuka is assigned male at birth, but prefers a feminine name, has a very feminine room, and dresses in girls' clothing throughout the entire season. Yuka struggles with identity and sexuality issues, but Chloe can probably talk about this character far better than I can.
Okay, so Yuka Ayukawa is a very interesting case in terms of gender TM characters, in the sense that many aspects of the character, even despite several years of the series being out for, are still hotly being debated today as to whether or not it is true. Think the constant questioning of characters like Ostafo in the Fate franchise, where in some instance the creators at Type Moon will list their gender as being male in one part of the franchise and secret in another part of the franchise, which leads to debate upon debate on what exactly is the truth in regards to their status in the spectrum of queerness, if they even fall underneath it to begin with. But taking it completely at what we have to work with in regards to Yuka as a character in Blue Period, from the way they are being presented to the way the characters in the show react, to how they dress, to even how they talk about themselves, it's obvious if Yuka isn't an in-denial trans femme, they are at least either genderqueer or gender fluid with the way they present themselves. Again, purely going off what is presented in the series, Blue Period as a manga is still ongoing, and the writer has yet to confirm anything in regards to them as of yet, to my current knowledge as of writing this anyway, so for now we're just adding to the speculation pool with this. Getting back on track, however, Yuka's arc in the show is one that focuses hardline on the unfortunate reality that many trans folk, regardless of where they fall on the spectrum of queerness, deal with in their home lives as they choose to explore their gender identity in their younger years. The fact that their family will either not be supportive of it, or worse off, be potentially violent about their displeasure of it. And without spoiling too much on the matter regarding it, some of the instances where Yuka has to deal with it in their home life when shown on screen can be a bit triggering to those who have had to deal with it in their home life, especially in later aspects where it can feel like it was inspired by often real stories about how some kids are treated by their parents for not turning out right by them. The shining light in those moments is the relationship between Yuka and Yatora, which helps Yuka come to terms with their own identity over time, whatever it may be, and finding out the confidence to be more honest about themselves and their own art thanks to him being around and keeping Yuka going. As a side note as well, I've seen people make the comparison between Yuka and recent entry into canon of queer anime characters in Tsubaki from Windbreaker, given their similar natures. But I actually want to nip that in the bud real quick due to the widely differing nature of both characters, but also in the sense the creator of Windbreaker, Satoru Nii, has confirmed Tsubaki as a gay cross-dressing cis man. So while Yuka may be in fact be a similar case to Tsubaki, Yuka-chan arguably has a lot more depth to their character that has yet to be confirmed or denied in the long term, and until we know for certain what exactly Yuka is, I say Yuka is Yuka, and that is just fine.
And then I watched Cherry Magic, 30 Years of Virginity Can Make You a Wizard. Yes, that's the legitimate title. As the title would suggest, Kiyoshi Adachi turns 30 years old and gains the ability to read people's minds. The catch is that this power only works when he touches a person. Ayo. Even though these powers seem like they could be used for a ton of purposes and a lot of fun, it's used as a way for Adachi to realize his Superman of a coworker, Kurosawa, is actually madly in love with him. From there, the two start to grow a lot closer, and Adachi is challenged with finding out if he can overcome his awkwardness to make a relationship happen. Like I mentioned, the power has the potential to be used for a lot of fun stuff, but instead it's only really used as a means to push these two characters closer. Any conflict that could have existed, immediately solved, because Adachi can read minds. I think it also is kind of weird that outside of Kurosawa, we're meant to believe that so many people in Japan are just comfortable with being touched for a long period of time so that Adachi can read their minds. Working with the power to make them inevitably get together is pretty much every character in the show. They randomly get chosen to kiss each other at a work party. They randomly get given tickets to go out and eat together. Kurosawa's sister randomly decides to kick him into Adachi's place uninvited for a night or two, and plenty more. Their relationship with each other progresses extremely quickly, which kind of makes a lot of the series feel as if it lacks a reward for the viewers with meaningful progression in their relationship. For a bulk of the series, the writing felt lazy more times than it felt inspired. And I gotta admit, I was pretty bored.
Given that this is based upon a story in manga form by mostly unknown until this point Yu Toyota, and further adapted by Studio Statelight by a team of newbies as well, I do want to try and give credit that maybe a lot of the problems with the writing comes down to the fact that this is all their potential first time writing something like this, and a lot of boys love story in general, but arguably with how far the genre has come since the later entries we'll get onto here, it all kind of feels like they want to evoke a certain vibe from the era I'll allude to later on for all the good and bad reasons. On top of that as well, it really does feel like at times like the plot is just trying to force these two together like it's written by a yaoi fangirl getting her ship together from the same era as well. Like Hunter mentioned, it is very lazy in that regard, but when the moments do happen, well, it feels like we are speedrunning through the bulk of their love story, as it were. It at least gives us some nice moments of fluff to look at overall.
Two of the characters needed a lot of time to grow on me too, those being Kurosawa himself and their co-worker Fujisaki. Kurosawa, despite being pretty reserved on the outside, is a gigantic pervert and super pushy. The pervert stuff is whatever. Sometimes it's weird, but, you know, let people have their fetishes and fantasies. It is typically the main crux of the comedy aspect for the show, with it poking fun at how weird some of his thoughts are. Although, personally, I didn't find them funny, nor did I find a lot of this show humorous. The pushy stuff sometimes felt a little uncomfortable to watch. Before they were even lovers, he was repeatedly pushing and pinning Adachi against shit. I know that to certain audiences, this is meant to be like a fan freak-out moment, but for me, I was just a little off-put. The other character, Fujisaki, is a Fujoshi. She was thrown in as a gag character, but sometimes she felt kind of like a self-insert of what the target demographic for the show likely is. There is another couple in this series, Minato, a 23-year-old dancer, and Suge, a 30-year-old author. Despite their age gap potentially being weird to some viewers, their romance was far stronger than Adachi and Kurosawa's, in my opinion. Suge can read minds much like Adachi, but he doesn't use it as a crutch and acts how he normally would towards Minato. They grow closer together over time in ways that feel natural, and Suge helps Minato realize his dreams. There were a few times while watching them that I wished they were the focus of the series. Plus, Suge has a cat. I love cats.
Yeah, not gonna lie here, with all the characters involved made me feel like I was back in the dredges of late 2000s, early 2010s boy love stories in terms of vibes of the characters and overall plot of the show in general. To say the scenes between Adachi and Kurosawa gave me reminders of the dynamic between Ashiko and Misaki from Junjo Romantica is not me giving this series praise, mind you. And for as much as Fujisaki being a Fujiyoshi could essentially be seen as a parody of fangirls from that era in question in a comedic tone, at times her presentation can go from being a blatant self-insert like what Hunter mentioned before to, in my opinion anyway, feeling like an insulting caricature of the aforementioned fangirls of that era that came before. All in all, while the cast of characters are certainly an eclectic bunch for sure, it really doesn't do much of a service personally for me to come back to a series like this, and it's very much telling that a lot of people, even those that enjoyed the genre, are very much all over the place in terms of their opinions of this series, particularly even a year later.
Much like Strawberry Panic, it does lock in once we get to the later half of the series, as a conflict finally arises that can't be immediately solved with mind reading. It was here that the series got interesting and had meaningful growth in their relationship, also delivering a fine ending. Although the first half was incredibly weak, if you ask me. It's just a really uninteresting, uninspired watch. Compared to a lot of other gay media out there, it's definitely a pretty good pick, but I was just so not invested in what I was watching. So you'll probably like it, you probably won't, or there's a chance that you end up feeling like I did. I thought it was okay. I'll give the series a 6 out of 10.
Now there it is, the gay bomb.
And then I watched arguably one of the most iconic and influential anime of all time, Mahou Shoujo Madoka Magica. Madoka Kaname lives a fairly normal life with her best friends Sayaka Miki and Hitomi Shizuki. She is a very happy girl. Later that day, her life changes forever when she meets Kyubei, a cat-like familiar who is being attacked by the new transfer student, Homura Akame. After being saved, he offers to make a contract with her and Sayaka to become magical girls, and in exchange, he will grant any one wish of theirs. For whatever reason, if you aren't familiar with the term magical girl, it's a subgenre of anime that focuses on young girls with magical abilities. Typically, the girls live 2 lives, with one being their normal life and the other being their magical life. Some popular examples are, of course, Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura, and if you watched last year's video, Flip Flappers. While the genre hasn't had the biggest transition into the states like shonen has, magical girl is arguably one of the largest and most popular subgenres in Japan. Outside of Flip Flappers and, unfortunately, Prisma Ilia and Utena, technically, I'm completely unfamiliar with this genre and its typical tropes.
Let's put it like this then, as someone who basically is obsessed with the genre, on one side of the coin you have series that play into the genre archetypes like your Cardcaptors, Sailor Moon, Magic Knight Ray, or Precure and the like. The other side of the coin you have those that change the archetypes forever like Utena, Maihime, Lyrical Nanoha, and even Symphogear and Yuki Yuna. Madoka Magica, however, stands above them all as basically the one which is seen as not just the biggest game changer of all the magical girl genre to that point, but essentially more or less became the signifier of magical girl anime before and after it, as its influence is still felt across the board to the point while most magical girl animes do in fact still take from stuff before Madoka, its shadow looms over the genre nearly 15 years on for a reason.
I was admittedly a little familiar with the show. When I was in 4th grade, around the age of 10, we purchased a Netflix subscription and I'd begun watching anime on my Xbox 360. Netflix back in the day didn't have a ton of shows, so I'd watched at the time Fairy Tail, Sword Art Online, Hetalia, and Girls Bravo, the latter of which a 10-year-old should not be watching. One of my friends at the time, Grace, recommended Madoka Magica to me. I had a fat crush on her, so I started it pretty soon after to try and impress her with my knowledge of it. I enjoyed the first 2 episodes just fine, but the 3rd episode of the series had an event that scared kid me so badly that I dropped the series. Madoka Magica is not for the faint of heart, and while it might not be as intense as other series, it is certainly dark. It also wouldn't surprise me if the community rule of watching 3 episodes before dropping a series came from Madoka.
Well, as someone who watched it as it was airing back in the day in the first core of 2011, while the 3-episode rule was on a case-by-case basis back in the day, it basically became law when Madoka reared its head, as following on from the series using the first 3 episodes to bait the audience in with being another slightly darker magical girl series with some cuteness on the surface, to outright being a series which excels in the grim dark aspects from episode 3 onwards until its seeming endpoint, which we may experience in the upcoming movie that may finally release this year. Which is to say, Madoka did just change the game for its genre. It changed how many people look to approaching anime in general going forward, and not making their first impressions be the deciding factor on whether or not they continue. And if it didn't just change in certain factors regarding the anime landscape and in its own genre, let's say that Madoka was a game changer for a lot more than just what we've already said.
Talking about Madoka is pretty difficult without spoiling the series, and even though it did originally air 14 years ago, I'm aware that the last video was people's gateway to a lot of new anime. So I'm not going to assume that everyone here has watched this show before, so Let's see. What can I share? Madoka Magica is an anime original written by Gen Uribochi, writer of acclaimed series like Psycho-Pass and Fate Zero, and brought to life by Studio Shaft. Shaft is notorious for having some of the most breathtaking animation and stellar direction to their anime, like the Monogatari franchise, March Comes in Like a Lion, and Zetsubo Sensei, and Madoka Magica is clearly no exception. In fact, most of the show feels like it has the production of modern anime movies like Jujutsu Kaisen Zero or Mugen Train. Every episode looks amazing. Knowing that this anime came out a decade and a half ago puts so many modern shows to shame, but the animation isn't the only standout here. The direction is also superb. The shot composition in Madoka is insane. Honestly, it looks better than some movies that come out nowadays. As someone who works in the film industry, there were countless times something would happen on the screen and I think to myself, wow, that was an amazing shot. Of course, the Shaft head tilt is iconic in all of their anime nowadays, most recognizable in Monogatari, and it is present in this show as well. I loved how we often had vast landscapes and unique architecture with the characters being the focal point of the scene, so much so that other characters would disappear from frame. There is a lot to be said about the production of this anime that I feel artists from all types of crafts can draw inspiration from. One artist that comes to mind is Yoko Taro, who used Madoka Magica, Evangelion, and Berserk as inspirations to create Nier Automata. Outside of the production, all else I can really say is that Homura joins the ranks among some of my favorite characters in fiction. This shouldn't be much of a surprise to those that avidly watch the channel, but I did really love her character. The way that the Magical Girls work and operate the show is pretty cool to me too. Magical Girls' whole deal is to go around and take witches which pop up in their own unique zones around the world. These spaces, called labyrinths in the show, are highly surreal in nature, often depicted with real-world imagery or stylistic animation choices. I love how they feel like a childhood dream, and while they appear as if they are harmless, they are anything but. The reason they needed to go after these witches is because they will make humans do harmful things, and when defeated, a witch drops a grief seed which lets a magical girl use her magic. Talking about anything else would involve major spoilers for the series, and I'd like to introduce you guys to it so you can watch it if you want. I would like to make a video on this show one day, but so much has been said about it by so many people that I'm not sure what I would have to say that would be different. Plus, I still do need to make a video about Devilman Crybaby, Utena, and Flip Flapper. To the backlog of videos I'll hopefully make one day. If you're new to anime, or you're a veteran for the medium, go watch Madoka Magica. If you've already seen it, fuck it man, go watch it again. I'll be giving it a 10 out of 10. Talking about the LGBTQ elements present in Madoka is also pretty difficult given that it could be spoilers, either major or light depending on the character. There are two characters in the show that, although it is never explicitly said, are likely in love with another girl in the cast. That's all I can probably say though. Do you have anything you want to share, Chloe?
With pleasure. Without overtly spoiling anything regarding the series, there's two main dynamics within the main quintet and the magical girls involved, which operate as two sides of the same coin in regards to how realistic falling in love in a doomed situation like being magical girls can be, especially within the world of Madoka Magica. One involves a bit of an interesting love triangle, while also including a side character which acts as the main inspiration for one of our main characters in Sayaka Miki. Something which is made clear from episode 1, so I feel comfortable mentioning it as part of this. But to save the impact of the moments involve both sides for that situation, let's just say that the best intentions lead to tragic ends. Which honestly could be the case for the other, more obvious one, which is obvious to anyone even giving a passing glance at anything related to Madoka Magica, as the main duo of both Madoka and Homura share a doomed Yuri romance for the ages that transcends both the entire chain of being as much as it transcends traditional conventions. This is to say, if you enjoy a good romance that will leave you a blubbering mess by the end of its 12-episode run, and then crush you into dust with its movie, then you will adore Madoka Magica for that, and its contributions to the magical girl genre, and then some.
And then we watched Twilight Out of Focus. Roommates Mao Tsuchiya and Hisashi Utomo have 3 rules. Mao must refrain from telling others that Hisashi is gay and has a boyfriend. 2. Hisashi must not fall in love with Mao. 3. They are to respect each other's privacy when it comes to cranking the wank. While these seem super easy, all 3 are thrown into question when Mao realizes that he has feelings for Hisashi when they begin to film their club's movie. Mao must navigate his realized feelings and make sure they don't interrupt the production of their short film. This show moves fast as fuck. Mao realizes his feelings in the first episode. There's also an assault adjacent scene in the first episode, which leads Mao confessing to Sashi, and they kiss in the next episode, and then they become romantically involved and have sex in episode 3. They cover what most romance shows spend seasons doing in the span of 3 fucking episodes. Then the show does this with 2 other couples. It basically enters a cycle of introduce a couple, have them realize feelings, they confess and are immediately met with reciprocation, and then they fuck like rabbits. If the season were 24 episodes or something, I don't think this would have been an issue, but since the anime is only 12 episodes, this makes the show have breakneck pacing. Each couple gets about 3 or 4 episodes of time to spend with them. Because of this, we hardly get to know the characters before their romance is basically fully developed, and once we move to the next set of characters, that's basically the last we'll ever get to see of the previous couple. It made latching onto anyone or any story pretty difficult to do, and once you realize the formula with the second couple, the third one was super boring.
Yeah, I'll be real about this one. While the premise is a bit pedantic with its, oh, you're not allowed to do this, kind of forbidden love aspect to the dynamics involved, as well as the can barely coexist to, oh wait, they're actually lovers vibe to their whole dynamic, makes it a bit hard for me to suspend myself in terms of keeping interest when it feels like the story just wanted to, once again, speedrun through to the good shit as quickly as possible. That's honestly the biggest problem with this and other more modern boys love anime, if I can be blunt here. They really could do with taking notes from modern Yuri stories that seem to love a slow burn so much that we don't even fully get to see the main duo kiss most of the time until the final quarter of a season. Meanwhile, you have full skin-to-skin contact with the main boys in this within the first quarter. This isn't me being a prude, mind you. I'm just saying, while I love some of that good gay shit, I want it to be earned, mind you, and feel like there is genuine chemistry behind them and not just feeling like we have the click remote in place to get them to where the Fujoshis want them to be quicker.
The art style and character designs were pretty pleasant to look at, and I did enjoy the connections or references to real movies that were in the opening and occasionally in the show. Working with cameras, lights, and being on set made me appreciate the attention they were giving to some aspects of movie making, but really the writing leaves so much to be desired that it makes the rest of the show rather dull. I really wish there was more to say, but everything else about this show screamed underdeveloped.
Well, given that this is a modern Studio Dean production and their track record for somewhat pleasant visuals but very undeveloped story is most of their catalog, it really isn't surprising to say in regards to that fact. But hey, when 50% of your catalog is basically similar but different story in the yaoi category, and the rest is either Hitalia, Higurashi, or God help you pre-ufotable fate adaptations, it's not really a case of, is this going to be mid, as much as it is, how mid is it?
I'll give it a 5 out of 10, although I would still recommend it to those watching because they could find enjoyment despite the pacing and character swapping. It just was not at all for me. Continuing the iconic shows on the list, I watched Land of the Lustrous. Phospholite, more commonly known as Phos, is often looked down upon by the other gems, both for their behavior and for how fragile they are. Seeking companionship, they meet Cinnabar, another gem who is isolated far away from everyone and to watch over the night. Wanting to help them, Phos promises to find a new job that is fun for Cinnabar, and the series follows Phos on their quest to help Cinnabar, as well as chasing their desire to join the battle against the Lunarians. Land of the Lustrous is a hard show to describe the plot for, as we're kind of just thrown right into the middle of a well-established world with a lot of history, which I say is a great indicator of a good story. At some point, something happened here. We don't know what. We don't know how, but something that forever changed the planet occurred. Somewhere down the line, gems started washing up on a shore, and if enough of them are close together, they may give birth to a sentient, human-like gem called a Lustrous. They fight the battle against Lunarians, god or Buddha-like entities from the moon, or at least we assume so. Although we aren't sure why they appear here, it seems they want to collect the gems and to take them back to the moon for some reason. They fight them with swords made from obsidian by the gem obsidian, funny how that works, and their ability to wield swords or fight with them is determined by their hardness and toughness. This is figured out by a scale similar to the Mohs scale of hardness, which is a real scale that determines how hard a mineral is based on how easy it is to scratch its surface. For example, a diamond on the Mohs scale is a 10, meaning that it is incredibly hard to scratch its surface. However, a talc crystal is a 1 scale, meaning it is super easy to scratch it. Where it differs from the Mohs scale is toughness. Although I'm not sure how exactly Land of the Lustrous determines toughness, it seems to be gem dependent on how likely they are to break. To take an example from the show, Bort and Diamond are both types of diamonds, meaning they are both high in hardness, but Diamond breaks easier than Bort, making Abort the stronger fighter. Some gems are born with powers, such as Cinnabar. The real-life gem Cinnabar is made up of mercury sulfide, so in the show, they emit mercury from their body. Much like real gems don't disappear unless they're broken to bits, a gem in Land of the Lustrous is immortal as long as they have enough gems in them to keep them alive.
Damn, I didn't realize we were suddenly watching Steven Universe for this video, Hunter.
Are the crystal gems will always save the day.
Okay, yeah, bad joke aside, I do very much feel like that easy jab of a comparison is the one lone thing I really have to joke about regarding the premise. Because aside from that, Land of the Lustrous was genuinely a fun romp all throughout, with a premise that, well, it could be mistaken for being an early 90s series with the androgynous people facing off against the Moonmen plot. It was a nice little throwback to similar themes and plots of anime gone by.
It's a funny point, it does kind of feel like a 90s series, but you know, disregarding that and my rock lesson aside, it's obvious that the way the gems work in their power system is incredibly thought out, and I love how the world feels organic. Phospholite is very delicate and is presented as such in the show. They break constantly at the beginning. Despite that, they yearn to be better and stronger so that they can help the people around them. Land of the Lustrous is essentially a show where Phos learns how the world around them works, who their fellow gems are, and if they have any greater purpose in the world. Watching them develop through the show, going from being someone no one really liked to being dependent and relied on felt very deserved, especially given what they had to go through to get to that point. Phos has to lose parts of who they are and their identity, and although we never see the end result of this question, it's posed whether this loss of self in exchange for a higher purpose is truly worthwhile. I love it when media tries to tackle the human condition and what it means to be human, and I think it's an even more interesting approach to try and explore this through things that aren't human. The story begins to pick up and truly set into motion after we're introduced to a third faction of the world, which is the Admirabilis, or Fish People. Their introduction in the midpoint of the series marks a turning point, and after that, despite how colorful the show presents itself as, there's always a cloud of a darker mystery about what is going on actually in this world. As we finally get to a point where the mystery starts to get addressed, the show unfortunately ends. There is plenty more source material to cover. In fact, the manga has finished its serialization as of last year, but part of me worries if this show will ever finish. You see, season 1 of Land of the Lustrous aired nearly 10 years ago. The studio behind the show, Orange, seems to be much more wrapped up in Beastars and Trigun. While those series are good, this means we may never get the second season, meaning you are going to need to read the manga if you ever want to see this series conclude, which I have started doing after watching this show because, if you cannot tell by my ramblings, it is spectacular.
I'll go into my more detailed thoughts of the premise of the androgynous non-binary representation of the main cast in a moment, but for what it's worth, it wouldn't surprise me if, like most single series adaptations in the mid-2010s, that they didn't get much traction outside of its initial airing, and as a result, when the studio moved forward with other projects, it was simply thrown by the wayside. I do personally hope, however, Orange does eventually revisit this series, if only to give it a proper send-off and showcase where the manga goes, because having done my homework for the manga's back half, oh boy does it get more interesting at times of where it takes the three differing factions and the themes presented, but I'll let you all read through it yourselves to make that call on your own.
One thing that did leave me feeling a bit iffy is the animation. Land of the Lustrous, for the most part, is 3D animated. I think in most instances it fit well enough, like many of the action sequences were really great. But there were some other times where I just thought to myself, oh, that didn't look very good. From what I can tell, it's the first anime the studio used 3D animation heavily in, and while I think they have since gone on to really perfect their style with Beastars and especially Trigun, God, does Stampede look amazing. It definitely sometimes comes off as amateurish in Land of the Lustrous. I can only imagine how good this show would look if Orange made it nowadays. Outside of this animation critique, I do think Land of the Lustrous has a lot to offer, and I feel like it would have even more to offer if it ever got a chance to get another season. I don't know if you can tell, I'm a little bitter about that. However, since we don't have one, the story feels very incomplete as of this moment, but it is still a really good show, so I feel an 8 out of 10 is an appropriate rating.
Rock solid.
As for how it fits into the overall theme of this video, I'm sure you may have noticed, but I used them when referring to the gems because they're all non-binary. They are completely androgynous, and the creator of the series has said the gems are meant to be gender neutral. However, despite the author saying they are meant to be gender neutral, the show has still garnered a lot of debate on the identity of the gems, and also a bit of conversation about whether this is good or not for non-binary representation.
Whether or not you believe it to be good representation is up to each person's exclusive ideals on the matter. But in regards to the idea of more characters and overall cast not being bogged down by gender identity in a binary sense, much like the aforementioned Steven universe, one could argue that not giving them a specific gender but allowing them to present more as feminine and allow themselves to interact and even sound slightly masculine is a way to try and break cultural binaries as well. It may not be perfect. Hell, it might be a bit confusing at times with how it is presented. But I'd argue that Land of the Lustrous is a unique matter of exploring gender identity in a non-binary sense, especially for the time it came out in the early 2010s for its originating manga, where we were still in the early throes of it being presented more earnestly in media such as this, and it fit perfectly in the anime for 2017 for sure.
Then we watched My Next Life as a Villainess. Not to be confused with I'm in love with the Villainess, which will be on this list later on. Katarina Kloss, to put it simply, is a brat. She acts very selfishly and rudely towards those around her, but all of that changes when she trips and smacks her head on concrete. The impact is hard enough to make her realize that she isn't from this world. She's from Earth. Somehow, she fucking died and was reincarnated into the last Otome game she was playing. Fortune Lover. The big catch here is that she wasn't reincarnated as the protagonist of the game, she was actually reincarnated as the main antagonist or villainess of the story, and in every route in the game, she will die. Not wanting to meet an untimely death again, she gathers her knowledge about the game to fight her fate and live on past the events of Future Lover. An Otome game, for those that don't know, which I actually didn't know until I watched this anime, is a romance game where typically a female protagonist has to choose a route, then engaging with and eventually dating one of the male characters in it. The most popular example of this type of game is Mystic Messenger. To stop her fate, Katarina will have to make sure that whoever the protagonist picks won't end up killing her, and she'll have to be on good terms with the protagonist too.
Given the fact that this is subtitled All Roads Lead to Doom, obviously hijinks are to be assumed from the get-go. But for a concept such as the isekai, where it's usually every heterosexual boy's fantasy come to life with a harem awaiting them on the other side without much effort involved, this and another series of a similar nature, The Executioner and Her Way of Life, one I may have to convince Hunter to look at if he revisits this topic next year, seem to love putting nerdy high school girls in predicaments of danger. In this one seems to be a bit of a variety more akin to The World God Only Knows but for the queers. This isn't a dig, mind you, but it's more or less the more overtly comedic of the two villainess stories we'll be covering here.
The first few episodes are actually incredibly sweet, with Katarina building friendships with a myriad of people who could really use a person like her in their life. Knowing that the path these characters normally would go down, being a less happy, very unfulfilled journey, makes them all being happy and fulfilled all the better. Katarina manages to do a good job making friends with all the people she needs to. In fact, she does such a good job that a technical love octagon forms, with the 4-route romance interests, Keith, Giordo, Nicole, and Alan falling in love with her. The protagonist, Maria, falling in love with her, and 2 of the side characters, Mary and Sophia, also falling in love with her. While watching, I found myself smiling and laughing the first few episodes until it hit me that I wasn't watching a typical romance show. I was watching a reverse harem with a bisexual main character. Normally, I'm not a harem fan. Let me make that clear. I don't care much for High School DxD or the quintessential quintuplets, and longtime viewers of this channel know how I feel about fucking Rent-A-Girlfriend. And I'll admit, a lot of this show didn't work too well for me in terms of the romance department. However, the main love interest, at least in season 1, not sure how this changes, is Maria. And she's great. Katarina and Maria have a super sweet, really adorable dynamic with each other, and episodes with Maria as the focal point are some of the best in the season. The only unfortunate thing is it's hard to tell if they'll end up together, because if they don't, this could obviously be queerbaiting. Although I will say, it is possible that they do end up together because this world seems to be very comfortable with gay and lesbian couples.
Honestly, it wouldn't be the first time that the team who worked on this used queerness to drag an audience into their anime, as the studio who worked on this in Silver Link are also responsible for giving us Fate Collide Lighter Prisma Ilia, try saying that 5 times, which has some very Interesting displays of Yuri baiting within its 3-season run, some of which cannot be showed on here for good reason, but a quick Google search can provide you with what you need for research. In that same vein, however, they also worked on Yuri Arashi, which, given that it was created by the creator of Utena, and one series we've yet to get on this list in Sarazanmai, says all that is needed. Point here being that Silverlink have done a pretty good job, all considered, with being restrained on their portrayal of this series. It's not too gaudy, nor is it too much of its portrayal of its more obvious harem tropes within it, such as the nature of the beast and all that, but I'd say it's well worth your time if you don't mind harem animes, or if you're okay with a bit of objectification on both sides of the coin.
The power system in this show is whatever. I mean, it's your typical isekai magic system, and at times it does feel like it leans into your typical genre tropes. Even so, shockingly, I did kind of find myself in love with the show most of the time. Katarina is an extremely endearing and funny protagonist to follow. Almost all of her antics were a joy to watch, and reoccurring bits with her like throwing a toy snake or her love for sweets were a lot of fun. For me personally, the humor hit consistently. The cast all feels pretty strong. Some more than others. Sophia and Maria are standouts because they get a lot of screen time and development, but other characters like Alan and Nicole are also very strong and fun to watch. Even secondary characters like the maid Anne and the class president Sirius get time to shine instead of just being background pieces. Of course, I think Keith falling in love with his sister is a little weird, even if they aren't related by blood at all, because I know some of you degenerates out there will say that it's fine. So I hope that he doesn't become the main candidate to win, because, I mean, siblings loving each other, come on guys. Do I really need to talk about this? The big problem that could arise from this show is that it's just the first season. While characters like Alan, Nicole, and Sophia are great, and while Maria is absolutely the main winner of the romance race now, that might not be the case at all next season. In fact, like Chloe mentioned, this could totally be a case of queerbaiting. So we'll just have to see. As it stands right now, the first season of My Next Life as a Villainess is a fun, charming, and sweet watch, but it's not perfect. I think a 7 out of 10 is appropriate for it. Next up is the film Kase-san and Morning Glories. Yui Yamada and Tomoko Kase are in very different places in high school. Kase is super social, a part of the track team, and a tomboy to the core, whilst Yamada is shy, very feminine, and just your average gal. Despite their differences in social standings at school and personalities, they find themselves drawn to one another and eventually begin dating. Immediately when I started the movie, I felt like something was a little off. The beginning parts of the relationship, which in most narratives are important, are shown in a very quick introduction that isn't even 2 minutes long. It was even stranger when the film ended because it felt incredibly incomplete. So I did some research, and I found that the film did indeed take a very strange direction. It picked up after the first 5 chapters, adapting 6 through 14 of the source material. This means that if you want to truly understand this film, you'll need to have read some of the manga before you watch it, and if you want the ending, you still have 11 chapters of source material to go through. I'm not sure why Zex, the studio behind this movie, decided to adapt the midpoint of the story without the beginning or conclusion.
Baffling as well, this is written and directed by Takuya Sato, whose previous credits include working on series such as Strawberry Marshmallow and Setai no Ichizan before it, and Other Side Picnic after it. The former two especially show a pattern of being more into comedy and slice-of-life aspects in them, which, while this definitely does revel in it from time to time, it's hard to not look at the pedigree of those working on it and wonder why the hell they made such decisions when adapting something in this manner.
I couldn't agree more. The way they decided to adapt this really, I feel, just hurt this anime a lot. I wish I could say something strong about this movie, but it didn't really leave much of an impact on me. The relationship was wholesome, sure, but was missing a lot of details that really would have made it tick. The animation and art is sweet and colorful, but felt it lacked some emotion to make the scenery truly beautiful. The movie threw us in so abruptly, and it ended as abruptly as it started, as it only had a 58-minute runtime. Unlike Stranger by the Shore, which adapted the entirety of its source material and has a similar runtime, Kase-san and Morning Glory chooses to only adapt 1/3 of the story, and I'm sure some manga context would have helped, but the movie really just didn't give me enough to want to go read it. Unfortunately, I'll be giving it a 6 out of 10. I really wish they had chosen to adapt this differently, and maybe I'll revisit it in the future when I feel like reading the source material. But if you're going to go and watch this series, please just read the source material first, so maybe some parts of it will make more sense. And then we watched Gravitation. Shuichi Shindo dreams about having his band Bad Luck be signed to a major record label, although he hasn't been able to finish the lyrics for any of their songs. His friend jokingly suggests he find a girlfriend to help him, but instead, he ends up finding himself a boy, the acclaimed love novelist Eri Yuki. They meet by chance with Yuki dissing Shuichi's lyrics, and Yuki ends up being the gateway to new worlds for Shuichi to hopefully achieve his dreams. Gravitation was one of the most requested boys love anime of the last video. This entire video, I have done my best to be positive about every show on this list. Gravitation is going to be the first show to break that rule. There isn't much to redeem here.
Much like Strawberry Paddock before it, Gravitation has a distinct reputation as being one of the more influential animes for yaoi of its time. Unfortunately, much like Strawberry Paddock, it's very much a mess in both its execution as it is one that shouldn't be remembered fondly as it is today. As I'd argue, this is one of the ones worthy of being forgotten about for recent examples we've come across on this journey so far.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with Chloe that I feel this should be a forgotten example, because this show tries to do three things: be an anime about music, be an anime about romance, and be a comedy anime. It doesn't do a great job at being a music anime, as once Yuki is introduced in the first episode, it takes up less and less screen time as the show goes on, letting it take a back seat in exchange for the romance. This is bad, because quite frankly, this might have one of the worst on-screen romances that I've seen in a show. Yuichi and Yuki are not compatible in the slightest. While Shuichi is practically head over heels for Yuki, Yuki does romantic acts while claiming he has no interest in being with another man. A lot of the show is Yuki flip-flopping on how he feels about Shuichi, and alongside that is an abundant amount of emotional and physical abuse, assault scenes, and a myriad of other forms of mistreatment. I have no issue with watching a toxic couple in media. Like last year, George and Yukari from Paradise Kiss were a pretty unhealthy couple, but the way that it was explored was much more interesting. Sawa and Tako, from one of my favorite pieces of fiction, Flowers of Evil, are both pretty bad people, and their foundation for their quote-unquote relationship is literally blackmail. The difference between Parakiss and Flowers of Evil compared to Gravitation is that those in the series are treated with respect and not glamorized, while in Gravitation, we see assault accompanied by silly and goofy 2000s anime humor. Art is meant to explore all types of topics and ideas, and naturally, of course, some of those are meant to be uncomfortable or weird. It all depends on how it was posed to us from the creator of the series. Higurashi, for an example of longtime viewers, is a show that on the surface is children killing each other over and over again, which could look gross and gory, but the contents of it are meant to be explorations of mental health in youth, and how opening up to others can lead to less suffering and more connectivity. An example of strange ideas posed to the viewer as either shock value or fetish content is again Valkyrie Drive Mermaid from last year, where while the idea is initially interesting, the entire show is meant to just put women in sexual scenarios with another in the act of letting the creator realize some of his fetishes. Now, while Gravitation is definitely not fetish content, at least I don't think so, it definitely does teeter a lot more towards shock value for a lot of the stuff presented in it. Sometimes Gravitation treats its subject matter with the severity it needs, but most of the time it, again, almost glamorizes the lifestyle and the relationship. After watching the show, I cannot think of literally one element of the relationship that I thought was redeemable about Shuichi and Yuki's romance. None of the darker contents of just how toxic the relationship could get was at all worthwhile either. The thing that really sours the intense and dark romance of the show is that it's also trying to be a comedy, and it's an early 2000s anime comedy at that. Many of the jokes are slapstick, loud or silly voice acting, and other absurdist humor. If you've ever seen an earlier 2000 anime, you'll be able to perfectly imagine many of the jokes that happen in this show. Comedic scenes like a car running into a building or someone headbutting a wall down just doesn't work when you show scenes of abuse and assault in that same episode.
Given that the writer of the manga Mari Murakami would later go on to do battle shonen and comedy series post-Gravitation, it reads like her wanting to get her innermost obsessions out into printed medium like this and then move on. Unfortunately for her, this became her most famous work thanks in part to Shinichi Watanabe's anime adaptation of it. Nabishin, by the by, is the same one who would give us Excel Saga's anime adaptation as well. So with these two combustible elements together, it unfortunately makes for a very off-the-wall affair that has no idea what exactly it wants to be, and at the end of the day, makes nobody happy as a result, especially in current years.
One of the only good parts about this show is Hiro, Shuichi's best friend. He's a really great and funny guy. And I guess the music's fine. The art and animation are pretty lackluster, but looked fine in some parts, but I mean, that's just like an early 2000 anime for you. The rest of the show sucks. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. I see why people love Newer Boys Love Anime so much, because you guys were really struggling to have good shows not too long ago. After the awful taste Gravitation left in my mouth, I went to watch a highly regarded show, Banana Fish. On a cold open during the Vietnam War, a soldier opens fire on his comrades for seemingly no reason. All he is able to utter is Banana Fish. Years go by, and that soldier's brother, Ash Lynx, begins to investigate Banana Fish after someone dies right in front of him saying the same words. Despite being the leader of a gang under the mafia Don Dino Galzine, the Don doesn't take too kindly to Ash beginning to look around, ambushing a bar he's at while kidnapping Skip, Ash's good friend, and Eiji Okamura, a Japanese photographer. He is now tasked with saving them and discovering the truth of Banana Fish, all while fighting off the same mafia that raised him. Banana Fish is a show that I've heard talked about for years now, and now that I finally watched it, I can see why. This series talks about and showcases some really grim, dark topics: corrupt politicians, child abduction, dangerous drugs, gangs and gang violence, PTSD, sexual assault, pedophilia, and so much more. Despite being written initially in the 80s, and this adaptation coming out in 2018, many of its contents are eerily similar to a case that would arise not only a year after the anime came out: Epstein. It is very easy to draw parallels between him and the main antagonist of the series, Galzine, along with other politicians in it to others that are currently alive now, ironically enough, while also taking place in America. All of these very real and unfortunately relevant topics in it helped the show feel gritty and dark. This is all while the series is marketed as a shoujo, meaning it's targeted to girls. It's in the same target demographic as Fruits Basket, Ouran High School Host Club, and Maid-sama, which I find hilarious given what this show talks about.
The idea that this series was directed by the same person who directed the entirety of Free Iwatari Swim Club before this, and Skate the Infinity after it in Hiroko Utsumi, a veteran of working within KyoAni's team with that in mind, it certainly doesn't surprise many that the way that this series presents its main duo in Ash and Eiji is very much similar to how she's presented characters like Haruka and Rin's dynamics at times. I establish this more to show that Utsumi is no stranger to this kind of obvious dynamic in the show she has worked on prior to Banana Fish, but also to show that she has definitely shown some restraint compared to her previous efforts. Anyone who has had to set through even half a season of Free can tell you what I mean by that.
She definitely didn't show any restraint in Banana Fish, that's for sure, because a lot of these topics are not treated very lightly, giving them the proper care that they need, mostly through the lens of our main character Ash, or Aslan Jade Colin Reese. A lot of awful, fucked up things have happened to him in his lifetime, and the only ray of light that emerges for him is Eiji, who for once in his life is someone that treats him just like a normal human being instead of some sex toy, killing machine, or evil genius. Their dynamic is very pleasant to watch in the show, but unfortunately it's adapted by Mappa, who also did Yuri on Ice. Much like the ice skating series, despite these two obviously being romantically interested in each other, the adaptation tries to convince us that these two are just platonic best friends, with the last episode literally having Eiji write that Ash is the greatest friend he's ever had. Meanwhile, in the manga, they are very openly lovers, or so I've been told. I've not read the manga. I could be completely wrong here, but everyone tells me that in the manga, they're just very open about it. This creates kind of a weird vibe to the show because it is almost fully comfortable showcasing people commit awful sexual acts like child predation and rape. In fact, for some reason, nearly every openly gay person in the show is some type of antagonist. This isn't good because if someone watches the show and is homophobic, they could use how the series depicts these characters as arguments for why they might not like gay people. Like, yes, gay people can be bad. I've got no issue with having some gay people do bad things, but having all of your openly gay characters be bad people, that seems really odd. I think you need to find a balance here of some kind. At the same time as displaying these awful acts, they are too afraid to have these two guys romantically kiss in a healthy way. I know some may try to argue, well, what about their kiss at the beginning of the show? And to that I say, context is everything. Not only were the two hardly acquainted with each other, the goal there was not romantic or sexual, it was to deliver a message through their mouths that otherwise wouldn't have been possible in a prison, which I know is a crazy sentence to say, but that's what it was for. It just upsets me that the director or writer of this adaptation is so afraid to have them be openly gay and romantic with each other, although it has some aspects of realism to it because, given what Ash has gone through in his life, it's completely possible that if he did love love Eiji, he would never be able to be in a relationship with him. He is littered with all kinds of trauma, especially sexual, so he may not know how to explore something that is actually meaningful and romantic. I know many people have interpreted Ash as aromantic or asexual, in fact, because of how he doesn't seem to know how to approach these things. It's complicated for sure, but I do think again that it's bad to only depict openly gay men as vile, evil humans. And I do want to make it clear again that this seems to be a problem exclusive to the anime, from what I've heard, as allegedly the two of them are more open in the manga. But again, I cannot say confidently that that's the case, as I've not read the manga.
You can especially tell that this was written during the 80s as well, and given a newer, fresh coat of paint for the late 2010s, especially given the team who worked on it has made mention previously. But while I do very much appreciate the narrative of Banana Fish works very well despite its original time frame of origin, especially how queer characters were not as prevalent as they are today, I do, however, have some issues with this being seen as a shoujo manga, however, especially given with how the original writer of the manga, Akemi Yoshida, portrays some of the aspects above as, while I will give some levity on the subject that it was written in a much different era than where we are now, the subjects of assault are given a lot more grace. I have to be blunt here in that the way that Yoshida writes a lot of the scenarios presented in this, either she doesn't understand both sides and only being really interested in telling one particular aspect of assault at best, or she's being a victim blamer for her writing style at the absolute worst.
I hope that she isn't a victim blamer, but writing assault with only one particular aspect of it surely isn't much better. Going back to the plot though, it's pretty interesting, especially once Max Lobo and Yutlong Lee got introduced into the wider scale of things. Max served with Ash's brother in Vietnam and is a freelance journalist who works with everyone to help expose these politicians and just what exactly Banana Fish is. And he ends up being the father figure to Ash that he never got to have growing up. Lee is kind of hard to get into without spoiling parts of the show, but he serves as a pretty good foil to Ash. Similar enough upbringings, it's just that one embraces their role while the other fights it. The initial mystery behind what Banana Fish is and what its greater purpose is, on top of who all is involved with it, is fantastic. The first 12 to 14 episodes are extremely gripping and engaging as the mystery gradually unfolds for all of us, and we learn how awful it would be if these politicians were able to go through with their plans. However, after this, I can't help but feel the show enters kind of a weird, repetitive state until it manages to conclude. By this, I mean that we have extreme, intense action sequences that somehow result in someone being captured, like Max or Eiji. They're conditioned to let this person free. Ash has to surrender himself. Once he does, he's brought somewhere, typically assaulted somehow, or gets something adjacent to tortured, but then he escapes and the rest of the cast come together to help him escape. Then he kills some people. He talks about how, ooh, he's so evil and he kills people, and we go right back to square one with the action scene happening and him being captured. I think this happens around 3 or 4 times in the span of the other 12 episodes, and once it happens the second time, you realize the formula it's going for. After watching Ash gets assaulted once, I got the point. That was graphic, and him killing those people made a lot of sense. But then we end up seeing it happen several times. At that point, I felt it was just really weird to consistently keep depicting this every few episodes. It's here that the mystery and suspense elements of the show dissipate, and I personally found myself pretty bored. I also found it weird that despite the modern setting being in the late 2010s, most of the subtext for the series were issues or topics that were most prevalent during the Cold War, which is when the manga was serialized, and oftentimes the setting reflected that. Things that would have been talked about or referenced are products of that time, and the gangs the show highlights often were very popular during that era too. Even still, the show tried to thrust it into a modern setting, giving them smartphones and such, which just really didn't feel like it ever worked. The setting consistently felt inconsistent. However, Banana Fish did manage to land an absolutely fantastic ending that wrapped the show up perfectly, while also being quite heartbreaking. In fact, despite me being bored and irritated with most of the second core of the show, the ending was so good that it managed to redeem or make me feel satisfied with the entire series. Something I was quite sure would not happen given how poor I felt the show had been growing. And of course, because Mappa is behind the series, it looks fantastic, and often quite cinematic. Don't let my complaints deter how I do appreciate the show not sugarcoating or idolizing intense topics. And I do think that Ash is a great character. Despite everything he's been through, he is still able to love those around him, and he'll do anything to stick by his friends. He often struggles with if he deserves to be happy in life at all, and I think that's a powerful struggle for him to have. It was also really refreshing to watch a show with adults and people my age, given how most of this list and most of anime focuses on high schoolers. No more festival arcs, let's go! Although I feel like things that stand out to me that I didn't like linger in my mind a lot more than things that I did like in it. I just can't help but feel that maybe I'm missing something about why people love this series so much, much. Maybe Chloe can offer some insight that I'm overlooking with it, but I'll give it an 8 out of 10. It's still a super solid series, but it's by no means a masterpiece.
The series does have its problems, glaring ones I've made gratuitously clear already before. But by no stretch is this me saying that I wouldn't say that it stopped my enjoyment of watching this, because considering the other boy love series we've seen up until this point, honest to God here, Banana Fish blows them all out of the water without explicitly being a series which is labeled as such. And really, I'd take that for what it's worth, as in a current era where we may be getting some of the most of this genre we've ever gotten, this series especially shows that sometimes less is truly more in the grand scheme of things, and that you need more than just the end goal being, these two are gonna fuck. And Banana Fish shows that the end goal being more complex of that in the best way possible. If only more of this nature were around, maybe we'd be more gracious to the boys that we've been seeing more than the girlies so far.
And then we watched Jellyfish Can't Swim in the Night. Mahiro Kazuki is a very talented artist, winning a contest to create a jellyfish mural in the city. When she goes to show it to her friends, instead of them being excited or supportive, they make fun of and ridicule her art, and thus she gives up on art. Years go by when on Halloween night, Mahiro finds somebody who loves and defends her mural, Kano Yamanouchi. After this, she is catapulted into helping Kano's music career as an artist for her persona Jelly, later recruiting her friend Kiwi Watasi, who prefers to go by Nox Rigisaki, to make music videos, and Kim Anukume Takadashi to write their music. Jellyfish is a show that has actually been on my radar since last year's Pride video. When I did the stream, going over the whole process of making the first Pride video, my friend Bean shared a clip of Nox that actually made me tear up and almost cry on stream. Ever since then, this show has been on my mind. So, now that I've finally got around to watching it, did it hold up? Yeah, I'd say it did.
Jellyfish is certainly one of the more dubious picks on this list, more on that in a bit, but don't let that take away from the fact that the series itself has a lot of heart, especially to those creative spectrums like Blue Period earlier in this video. Funny how that keeps on happening, huh? All facetious comments aside, however, Jellyfish Can't Swim in the Night does manage itself in a way that, while not immediately obvious regarding its sense of queerness, but more so about identity that has been hinted about in the past, in a way it's similar to animes such as Serial Experiment Slain, but without the more mindfucky aspects to it and a bit more grounded within the reality of the modern age.
Chloe's right, because at its core, Jellyfish Can't Swim in the Night is a show about identity and sense of self. Every character in the show's arc revolves around them figuring themselves out and what they want to do in life. Kano was an idol who worked for her mom's group, the Sunflower Dolls. Despite her talent, she was never acknowledged for it by her mom. All the credit went to her idol persona in the group. Now, she's on a journey to love and understand music for herself, what makes her want to sing, and to get her mom to finally acknowledge her for who she is. Mahiro is an artist who isn't confident at all in her skills, quitting for years, and once back in it, having little faith in her abilities even still. Her journey is about learning to not only love her art, but herself, and find how she can shine like a jellyfish in the night. Mei has struggled to make friends most of her life, but for the first time felt seen by Kano during her idol days, and is given an opportunity through Jelly to build meaningful relationships, and to maybe inspire hope in people who feel similar to her. Kiwi, who again prefers the name Nox, is extremely uncomfortable with their body and identity after puberty began to set in, and happened to have an extremely extravagant personality that people began to judge them for as they got older. Feeling as if, for some reason, they weren't normal, they ended up becoming a shut-in because of fear from how other people viewed them, later expressing their identity and self-worth through their VTuber model, Nox Rigisaki. Even side characters like Baba and Mero learn to come to terms with their identities and self-worth. The theme just oozes from every single minute of the runtime. Once the main group forms between Mihiru, Mei, Kano, and Nox, they all begin to help build each other up so they can reach their potential as people, and find their role in life. This 12-episode anime about so many different forms of self-discovery was brought to life as an anime original through Dagakoba, who most recently are known for both seasons of Oshinoko and, funnily enough, Chikawa. Naturally though, with Oshinoko under their belt, you can assume this show would be very pretty, and you'd be very right. The animation in it is nothing short of gorgeous. Every character model is so unique from one another, with unique senses of fashion that can help you identify what kind of person they might be just by looking at them. A lot of the animation was very vibrant and full of life. Not many moments felt static. The characters had realistic body language, which I found pretty surprising from a seasonal anime. It was genuine eye candy, and naturally, a show about music. You guys know that for me, a connoisseur of music anime, this is going to be either a huge hit or a huge miss by this point in the channel's history, and it was a hit. Episodes 3, 4, 5 and 12 had great original songs, with some of them having unique music videos made in universe by Nox.
どうしてここにいるんだっけ何を探していたんだっけそれ
It's amazing, personally anyway, that this came from the same studio that worked on series like Yuri and New Game before it, because even if both of those series had some nice moments behind it, it felt more like up until this point that Dogakobo was more interested in more comedically driven anime. But as Hunter pointed out, this is also the team that made Oshinoko about a year before this series, and suddenly you realize that this is probably the culmination of their efforts up until that point, which admittedly does make sense given that Jellyfish was made to celebrate the studio's 50th anniversary as a production company. And honestly, it shows given how much love and care goes into not just the visual and musical aspects of the series, but its story as well, being another in the long line of inspiring stories regarding creatives that we've come across both in the last decade, but especially on this video alone.
I gotta agree. Walked out of this series very pumped and inspired, but you could say that about quite a few of the entries on this list. I think there are definitely some great picks on here for creatives. However, there are unfortunately some drawbacks. I'll get the minor one out of the way first, which is that some of the camera angles in this show are weird. The first episode opens with Mihiru in her pajamas, almost flashing the audience a few times, and she's a minor. There are reoccurring shots like this on the chest, the butt, and sometimes on the feet. Ugh, not a Tarantino admirer. Feet doesn't mean cinema. Get your fetishes out of here. The bigger issues for me lie in the relationships between Kano and Mihiru and the aftermath of Nox's identity episode. Mihiru and Kano have a strange relationship, as it feels like most of the show they are building to a romantic relationship. Their body language when talking often suggests that they are very interested in one another. They do many couple adjacent activities and have couple adjacent scenes. They hold hands and have a very intimate hug. Hell, Kano even kisses Mihiru on the cheek in one of the episodes. Even their voice actresses in an interview were very excited to see how their presumably romantic relationship would evolve as the show progressed. But unfortunately, it never really did. It just stayed in a weird situationship kind of thing. The writer for the show, Yuki Yaku, wrote on Twitter essentially that he wasn't sure if the show was meant to be a Yuri, and that it was up to interpretation what the relationship was. If this sounds familiar, it's because that's what the Yuri on Ice writer basically said when addressing whether Yuri and Victor were dating, whether they kissed, and if they were going to get married. We never got a reason for why both Yuri on Ice or Jellyfish danced around homosexuality instead of going for it, but if I were to give my guess on the situation now with more knowledge about the anime industry thanks to working on both of these videos, it's that these productions might be worried about committing to LGBTQ themes. As of May 21st of 2025, gay and lesbian marriage is still illegal in Japan, and it seems they still face many prejudices as love hotels will often not let same-sex couples rent a room. As shitty as that may sound, some productions might worry that committing to these themes will deter certain audience members away from the show. If you ask me, I think that's bullshit. If you're going to write it, you are going to tease it until they are basically going to kiss on the lips, and they both mention how they're interested in someone, and that someone likely being the other. Just commit to it. You have already planted those seeds. If an audience member was going to be upset or leave because of a lesbian couple being lesbians, they would have left after the kiss on the cheek.
Kano and Mahiru feels much more like a dysfunctional relationship, if I can be honest here. While there were a lot of signs that led to the idea that these two could have eventually gotten together, it's really much more clear that these two need to sort their individual shit out before they properly get to that point, because no amount of gay comedy shenanigans can make up for the fact that Kano's abandonment issues really do self-sabotage her a lot throughout the series. An infamous example being in episode 9 where it reaches a breaking point and damn near split the fellowship they made in Gele apart because of the circumstances which led to her being in the situation she's in seem to come back around and haunt her so much. Mahiru, however, is no saint in this regard, as if she's really someone who has wanted to care or love someone like Kano, it stands to reason that she'd probably understand that the reaction from said people is so shocking and why it's more two-sided than one may think. You know, like any good relationship dynamic would. Again, it feels like this could have been done so much better and much more concisely if they did only have 12 episodes to work with here regarding it. I still to this day hope for a season 2 as well, but honestly, it's really disappointing that we don't really get much confirmation of what their deal actually is beyond maybe they will, maybe they won't. Especially coming from the comments of the creator after the fact akin to G-Witch's Miorine and Soletta.
Hopefully one day a season 2 will come out like Chloe was talking about, because there is absolutely more story to tell, not only for their careers as Jelly, but also between the two of them as a couple, and it's unfortunately pretty likely that any of that will ever happen. A season 2 would benefit Nox as well, because unfortunately they fall under this too. While it's clear that they are uncomfortable with their gender and their body, and prefer to be perceived as a man, we never get to fully dive into it. Maybe that's okay though? Nox gets much more development and care than the lesbian couple in the show, in my opinion, and it's clear that they are either meant to be non-binary or transgender. We just aren't sure which, and that could be because they aren't sure themselves. I think Nox is easily the best character in the anime though, hands down. I enjoyed watching a content creator that didn't come off as a studio being out of touch or cringy. I feel as if that is kind of rare these days.
The fact Nox as well switches from using watashi to ore during the series run as well indicates some level of transmask coding to them, which, much like the aforementioned readings regarding Kano and Mahiru, seems more like it is a case of the creator wanting to hint at something regarding them more than confirm anything regarding Nox's gender identity. Again, doubling down on Hunter's comments above when I say that Nox being more MP coded seems to be more of the focus than Mahiru's and Kano's potential relationship, but when you have to read between the lines and pay close attention to what they were saying in the original Japanese version, in order to get that kind of tone difference being more in focus, it says more to the team not being sure what they want.
Yeah, it's just really unclear what they wanted to do. You can tell story-wise, they had it down in the bag. But when it comes to what the characters kind of wanted to do to resolve their arcs as seeing who they are as people, they just were not sure about taking the final steps that they needed to for a lot of them, even though they easily set the seeds for it. And you could definitely really feel that because the last arc as a whole is completely a mess. Characters are making decisions that are very unlike them. They're making decisions that end up hurting other people, knowing they will hurt other people, that don't make sense with prior context in that situation. It's a mess. Again, you know, a season 2 could fix this, but that is just so unlikely at this point in time. But we'll have to see. You know, you never know. With all that being said though, it still is a really good show. I think it has a lot to offer to a myriad of different audiences that may feel they're stuck in life, whether it's about their future, their identity or self-image, or their talents. There will be something for you in Jellyfish. Just be prepared for some odd angles sometimes and a non-committal attitude to clear LGBTQ themes and ideas. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. If we do get a second season, which I hope they do, and they finally decide to commit to something, this rating will absolutely go up, but for now, this is what I feel is best with how much they were trying to tiptoe around it. Next up was Skip to Loafer. Mitsumi Iwakura loves her hometown to death, but she recognizes that it's gradually dwindling away to time. To help out in any way she can, both for her city and others like it, she applies to and ends up attending a very prestigious high school in Tokyo. Very, very far away. For as ambitious as she is, one thing she doesn't account for is that the city isn't as simply laid out as the country is, and finds herself very lost. Thanks to a bump-in with Sosuke Shima, she's able to make her way to school and begin her high school life far away from home.
It's another slice of life anime, sure, but I'd argue that this has a lot more heart to it than others we've covered to this point, and even some we're about to cover off the bat due to the fact that it doesn't hide itself behind a concept to try and bait people into it being the sum of its parts. To which I have to say, Skip and Loafer is a wholesome ride all considered, especially with our main duo Mitsumi and Shima having such good chemistry together as our main duo to follow throughout the series, something of which you can see from minute 1 of them sharing screen time together throughout the run.
Chloe is absolutely right, because Skip to Loafer has been on my radar ever since I saw some of the lovely covers for the series in my local bookstore, and now that I've finally given it a watch, I love it. Skip to Loafer is honestly a show that is pretty impossible to hate or maybe even dislike. The art style and colors create an environment that always feels bubbly and whimsical, making every episode inviting and exciting to watch. Aided by the immense visual appeal is honestly a ridiculously stacked cast for a slice of life show. Mitsumi, of course, has some pretty big goals, and while pursuing them through joining the student council and grinding grades, she also wants to live the high school life she's seen in TV shows, and she's been managing to do it pretty well. She's formed some great friendships, although most media might try to make you think people this different would never get along. Murashiga is noted to be quite beautiful, but views superficial elements to people or relationship drama as shallow, focusing more on her art, her dog, and meaningful friendships. Makoto appears as an antisocial shut-in, and although originally terrified of Mitsumi, manages to become friends with her and opens her views to more people, realizing that while sometimes they seem scary, they can actually be really good people. And Mika, who originally detests Mitsumi for the attention she receives from Shima, has a great arc throughout the show, realizing that somewhere down the line she became super shallow. Although we don't see the end result, she is clearly working to be better. Last, but certainly not least, of the main cast is the aforementioned Shima. Although he appears quite friendly and nonchalant, he's a chronic people pleaser with a lot of baggage from his childhood. It starts to come to the surface towards the end of the show, and it's clear in future seasons that he will have a lot to overcome to gain his own individuality. His dynamic with Mitsumi is the focal point of the series, and I'm glad it is because they're just a joy to watch. The supporting cast is also pretty great, with the drama club president Narumi being a great source for Shima to self-reflect from, Fumi being one of the best buds in all of anime, and of course Nao-chan, the reason this anime is on this list. Nao-chan is Mitsumi's aunt, who she lives with in Tokyo, and she is transgender. Honestly, it was kind of surprising how casually the anime was just like, yeah, she's trans, given again that Japan seems to not be the kindest towards trans people. Not only is this show so casual about it, it seems super respectful about it as well, and she's also just a plain great character, always looking out for Mitsumi and helps Mika realize some of the errors in her ways. Because of how casual the representation is in this series, it made me wonder if there was meant to be other depictions in the show. For example, there often felt like there was chemistry between Murashige and Makoto, and since there's a trans woman in the show, this could become a thing in the series, since it's not afraid to express LGBTQ ideas and characters.
Given that series run is still ongoing with the already mentioned second season coming out later this year, there is hope that perhaps the ship between Yusuke and Makoto becomes more than just that. If only to please the ravenous Yuri fanbase surrounding it, but also as well because their interactions over time in both mediums have become one of the highlights of the series and something to look forward to over time. For now, I'm just happy that Nao's elderly trans representation gives us something we arguably haven't seen in most media to this point in showing elder queers, where most media and all sides of it will focus on them being in a younger aspect, which, given that a lot of those that have stood up for the rights of the world that we are allowed to freely express ourselves are living with us to this day, it's a nice reminder that any level of queerness isn't just locked down to the more recent and younger generations, and that we've always been here in one way or another.
That's something I agree with a lot, actually. I feel societally it is perceived that this idea of homosexuality and transgenderism and gender identity as a whole is something that appeared like 10 years ago because Obama made it legal to be married if you are same-sex in the United States. And while that definitely did open the gateway, gay and trans people have been around for probably centuries now. While it definitely is nice to see it in younger generations, it's even better to see it with the older generations. Those people deserve to be who they want to be, and to love who they want to love. Skip to Loafer isn't a groundbreaking series by any stretch of the mile, not in the first season anyways. The thing that works so well with it though is that it realizes this, and so it doesn't try to be anything crazy, profound, or overly dramatic. It instead opts to wear its heart on its sleeve, much like the titular country girl this show revolves around, and bring a genuine experience to those watching it. I loved it. I really did, and I can't wait for the new season later this year. I'll be giving the show a 9 out of 10. Next up is Senpai is an Otokonoko. Saki Aoi confesses one day to her senpai Makoto Hanaoka, oh fuck man, these names, who she believes to be another girl, but to her surprise, Makoto reveals she's actually a boy. However, to his surprise, this doesn't deter Aoi at all, and she continues to pursue him whether he's a boy or a girl. Otokonoko is a Japanese otaku term used to describe men or teens that present themselves femininely in society, being translated directly, according to Reddit, as boy-daughter or boy-girl. Unlike the word trap, which is of Western origin and typically used as a demeaning term towards feminine-presenting characters in anime, Otokonoko seems to be more positive of a term and is almost exclusively used in Japan. Makoto, despite being assigned male at birth, is clearly a genderqueer or trans character, presenting femininely, loving cute things and girly things, and being thrilled to be seen socially as a girl. When attending their new school, Makoto is thrilled that everyone initially sees them as a girl and even calls the locker that holds called their girl uniform and feminine clothes the real Makoto. The reason I'm using they-them pronouns though is that the author seems hesitant to confirm whether this character is trans or not, opting instead to say that Makoto doesn't want to be a boy, but doesn't prefer being a girl either. It's kind of similar to what Chloe was saying about Yuka in Blue Period. Yuka is Yuka, and Makoto is Makoto, no matter what that label is. Although the author choosing to go the non-binary route has proven to be controversial to many. I personally felt it was fine, since Makoto doesn't go down the path of just believing that it's a phase and dropping this altogether. Instead, they choose to continue to present themselves how they want to, but I can see why this wouldn't work for many people. The biggest hurdle for Makoto, one that most gender-questioning people struggle against, is the approval of their parents. Makoto's mother is extremely against them having anything feminine or cutesy at all, focusing Makoto to wear a mask at home and hide who they truly are. This creates a sense of anxiety through the whole show, as while you want Makoto to be who they are, what if their mom finds out? What would she do?
Given that this series seems to be more following the more mature vibes of Wandering Sun than most other examples we've seen to this point, even down to being presented on the Nomination block in Japan, which its predecessor had been broadcasted in the past, it takes that similar concept and shows it more off with the focus of it being more of a realistic relationship between Makoto and Saki. Think back to it being more of a similar relationship between Yuka and Yotora in Blue Period earlier, except it doesn't take us 11 or so episodes for us to maybe figure out if the two of them do in fact have feelings for each other, or if we have an idea on Makoto's identity, which even then, the anime doesn't give us a concrete answer the manga does in the end. Personally, however, while many do feel Makoto not being trans femme was the quote-unquote wrong call to make, NB representation can show them not as being androgynous and more leaning on one side of the fence. So you know what? Good for them, even if they gotta deal with some bullshit on their family side like most genderqueer people do throughout the series.
Coupled with Makoto is a love triangle of the aforementioned Aoi and the later love rival Ryuji Taiga. Both characters appear to be pansexual, as both of them are in love with Makoto, regardless of what gender they present themselves as. I was pretty shocked how openly queer this anime was, and how it tackled some societally relevant ideas. For example, Ryuji is extremely conflicted for parts of the show on whether his feelings for Makoto are okay or not. Things we see him wonder are, is it okay despite Makoto being born a male? Would it be better if Makoto was actually a girl? Would it be better if he was born a girl? Would Makoto ever like him back since they're technically the same sex? Would mentioning it ruin their friendship despite being friends since kindergarten? Saki also is presented with the idea of whether she really likes girls or feminine presenting people, or is she just looking for someone to fill the void that her mom left her after abandoning her. Through Ryuji, Saki, and Makoto, we get very real struggles and conflictions that many LGBTQ people face in their daily lives to fight for their right to be themselves. Although, instead of focusing mainly on the journeys to understand their identities and sexualities, the show does instead spend most of its time focusing on the love triangle and how each character feels about each other. Which, like, yeah, that's fine. It is marketed as a romance series, so it's to be expected. But the romances aren't really too great. Something does end up happening, and two of the characters actually form a relationship that lasts a good little bit, but then it randomly ends without a ton of explanation or backing to it. The biggest issue here is that it doesn't focus on a lot outside of the romances. I did like how the show swapped between a realistic, dramatic art style and a cute, cartoon-like art style. I felt, in a way, that it mirrored how the characters would switch between having fun, living their school lives, and the harsh reality of their identities and future.
That part in particular feels more like an obligation to add it in more than anything else, and it shows in the finished product. Not saying I did personally enjoy it more than I did the overall vibes of seeing Makoto and Saki slowly become closer over time, but it's unfortunate that the series itself seemed more inclined to focus on the parts that we've seen more in most slice of life romances than focusing on the coming of age part that hooked a lot of people into watching this show to begin with. Not a dig at the series for following a formula to work, mind you. I just feel it would have been better in a long term to focus on those parts that got people invested from the title alone than just making it another mature-ish romance plot, personally.
Honestly, I agree with Chloe. While it did manage to stake a somewhat satisfactory ending, I do wish that the show was longer and got to explore more of the characters' relationships and individuality instead of focusing so much on the romance. The most interesting episodes of the series were when the characters struggled or were trying to understand who they are as people instead of on the love triangle. Although, I'm pretty sure the anime managed to adapt all of the source material, so further expansions on the story aren't possible unless a sequel series is written or the anime decides to make an original season, both of which are unlikely. Love triangles already aren't my favorite thing in media either, so while the series will be stunning to some, to me it just felt like I was wanting more the entire time. I still will give it a 7 out of 10 though, because I do gotta say the episodes where they did focus on the points that I liked were really interesting and probably going to be very relatable to some. Up next, we watched Mignon, which despite being entirely South Korean, seems to still be considered an anime, although it's called Any. So I didn't question it. In the underground boxing ring, Mignon is quickly climbing the ranks and becoming a bit of a star, with many people betting high numbers on his matches. Outside of the ring, he lives an unfulfilling life and is abused horribly by his coach. The only person who ever seems to treat him with care is Youngwon, the doctor of the ring. Realizing how much the doc means to him, Mignon tries to think of how to mention it, but accidentally stumbles upon the doctor drinking from a blood packet. The doc is a vampire. Mignon is entirely original with no source material, coming in at 12 episodes and each episode being around roughly 6 minutes in length, minus the last episode. I've never watched a Korean anime before, and I gotta say, the animation was surprisingly very stunning. The show is vibrant, colorful, and full of personality. Oftentimes, the setting felt reminiscent of Blade Runner 2049 or Cyberpunk. I love it when a series has a super poppy and colorful atmosphere with dark subject matter. It's just a very nice contrast.
Given the length of time for the series in total, you could essentially binge the entire series within 1 hour and still have enough time for one of the other 12 episode series that we have on offer for this list. For what it's worth, some people would think this limits the storytelling ability, given that each episode of only lasts a little underneath an episode of Bluey at times. But I'd argue that this gives Mignon an interesting way to tell what is essentially a short story that could have been given a movie-length feature or an OVA and spread it out in different parts to give it time to be properly worked on in their own limitations.
The characters in the series are very likable, but as you can imagine, they aren't super developed, since the runtime is especially short. Every time I felt myself really getting invested in the show, the credits would roll. Maybe instead of 12 episodes that are all 6 minutes, it would have been better to adapt it into like a 60-minute or so film. Moments that should be hard-hitting aren't. Moments that should be full of joy are dull. Crazy plot revelations just feel like they were thrown in. I think it would have helped if we saw Mignon's life more outside of the boxing ring to find out how his life was, or to see the moment he fell for the doctor, or to see the origin of the doctor being a vampire, or more of the aftermath of the series once Mignon becomes a vampire. Mignon is kind of a mystery. We see him get beat by his coach, box in the ring, and flirt with the doctor. Outside of that, he kind of lacks substance. The doctor practically is not a character. There is a lot of missed potential here, and since it's original, it could benefit from a prequel season, an OVA, or a sequel season. Just really anything here more to make the story feel more impactful.
For as much as I did want to give it credit given the length of each episode beforehand, I will definitely say that, much like most of the other entries to this point, Mignon's biggest flaw is that it doesn't really give us much time to really get to know the two main love interests, that being of the titular Mignon and our Youngwon. With the dynamic of Young being a vampire and how that complicates matters alongside Mignon's complicated outside life from boxing involving physical abuse, seriously, what is the deal with boy love characters and being abused? Much like Hunter mentioned, it's one of the many other examples where it could have been fleshed out so much more if it wasn't relegated to being a net animation, and would have been better overall if we had more of a chance to know or even care about the cast at hand.
Yeah, and that's just such a shame because the cast, again, is likable. The show looks great. It has so much going for it, except the runtime is just so stacked against it. Although one thing that did surprise me is that the last episode breaks the mold, making it 8 minutes long instead of the typical 6 minutes. Although, 6 minutes of the episode are dedicated to really intense sex. I immediately figured something was up because the rating changed from 15 plus to 18 plus. Kudos to Korea for doing what Japan is often too afraid of doing, outside of like Stranger by the Shore and Twilight Out of Focus. By that I mean having some dudes fuck each other. Like, gay people are intimate. Sorry Japan, I don't know if you want to hear that, but they are. It does of course help that South Korea is more open to gay couples, but they are still not allowed to marry, much like Japan. It was insane intense sex though. Part of me felt a little embarrassed. I was like, shit, should I be watching this? I feel like I'm intruding. While this probably would be a good climax, no pun intended, it kind of just felt hollow, given we really don't know a ton about either of these people, so the romance felt lackluster.
I'll say this, however, getting to see this level of raunchy sex in a boys' love anime is a nice change of pace, given that the previously mentioned Stranger and Twilight both kind of went for the safer option in terms of physical intimacy. It doesn't really give it much additional points, however, because it took up most of the runtime of the last episode, which arguably could have been used for much more important stuff. But hey, I guess it's par for the course by now.
I'm sure a lot of people will find something to enjoy here in the series though, as I did, and they are cute together. I just complain because, again, there's a lot of potential here for what could have been and what will probably never be. Still, I think it's a good series. I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
I am Dracula, blah blah blah.
And I know that while I didn't enjoy something particularly that much, there were probably some people that will be very enthralled by that last episode. And then we watched I'm in Love with the Villainess. Rei Uhashi works a training office job and her only solace is Otome games, with her favorite that she has religiously played being Revolution. It's very similar to the Otome game on this list, where it takes place in a fantasy world at a magical school, and the protagonist has her choice of 3 princes, Yu, Rod, and Thane, with the meddling villainess Claire there to stop the protagonist from completing the routes. However, as you may have guessed by the title, she isn't playing the game for the men. She loves Claire. It's not a real route in the game, but she falls asleep while playing and wakes up to find herself transported to the kingdom. Oh my gosh, isekai! No longer is she Rei Ohashi, she is now Rei Taylor, and she uses this new opportunity at Revolution's Bar Kingdom to attain the route she never could. The route to Claire's cold heart.
The second of the 2 villainess stories on this list, and being upfront here, I think it's not a controversial take to say that this is the better of the 2 for many different reasons, not the least bit being that unlike Next Life as a villainess, I favor has our main protagonist being the kind of Otome game fanatic that most female isekai main characters has overworked herself to death and is now in the last game she played. And to put it bluntly here, again, unlike Next Life as a villainess, I favor is a lot more unhinged in the way that it presents its dynamic as well. One could argue that Next Life was dedicated to trying to tell the story as being more straight. I favor makes no mistakes in telling you that this is just going to be just the most chaotically gay nonsense possible.
The author, Inori, is a happily married lesbian, and allegedly is a trans woman too. I say allegedly because I can't find proof of this since it is from a now deleted Twitter account of hers, but many longtime members of the community on the subreddit for this series are all in agreement that she made a post talking about being trans. But, you know, I couldn't find this, so take it with a grain of salt. Regardless if she is trans or not, I think it is lovely to get an adaptation from a lesbian creator about a lesbian love story.
She does, however, have a YouTube account where she does in fact talk with her fan base at times with a VTuber avatar. Having some time to scroll through the entirety of the backlog of her streams and hearing confirmation from other fans of Villainess, I'm happy to say that Inori is in fact transfeb, which is like an amazing feat for a series this big. But even aside from that, simply a married lesbian writing some good old-fashioned chaotic Yuri from the perspective of a queer mind, which honest to God is a rarity both on this list of series we've come across, and also just general give it all involved.
As for the show itself, it has some good and some bad to it. The first 2 episodes of the anime are particularly rough, with episodes mostly consisting of Rei declaring her love for Claire at any given fucking moment, while being openly a degenerate. By that I mean that she is ecstatic about being tripped when she's being stepped on, gets begged to be stepped on harder in fact, she loves being mocked, and a whole lot of other degenerate stuff you'll see people begging for dummy mommies to do at conventions. Then she seems to manipulate Claire's dad to let her become a maid at their home and at school. After becoming a maid, the weird antics ensue. For example, she gawks at her body while helping her get dressed and gets really weird when helping her bathe. She also knows literally everything there is to know about Claire, from extensive playthroughs, writing fan fiction about her, and reading every single guidebook, lore book, and watching every interview from the creator. Yeah, there's literally not one thing she doesn't know about her. So there's a bit of an imbalance in that way. Rei's incredibly creepy, comes off stalker-like, and she's also super pushy of her feelings. Not only this, but since Rei was a businesswoman before appearing in this world, that means she was well into adulthood, whilst Claire is clearly a minor still, which makes things get a little complicated because we have a mentally an adult with mentally a teenager, kind of adjacent to some Mushoku Tensei shenanigans. This makes them inevitably getting together a little strange. It's like a person getting together with their older stalker, and I'll leave it up to you how you decide to interpret that, because I know everybody feels a little differently about isekais with older people getting into younger bodies. It's a delicate topic. And while all that sounds bad, because it's certainly not the best, the show improves quite a bit after the third episode. It is a very productive conversation about prejudices gay or lesbian people may face from someone who is straight, especially in a society that might not be super accepting, and then how those unrequited feelings could be handled by the person who's crushing on someone who is straight. Will that person stay around? Will it forever break their friendship? How bad will it hurt until those feelings go away? While Rei is initially super pushy, we spend a lot of the show dissecting how her mind works based on experiences from the life she previously lived, and we understand to a degree why she's pushy. In fact, in hindsight, she might not even be pushy at all, because things we learn about her recontextualize her actions. She ends up making overly dramatic comedic displays of herself because internally she feels she has no chance to be with Claire. On top of that, it's revealed that she is actually willing to do whatever she can to help Claire be with who she wants, since she would prefer to see Claire happy, even if it means that she was the one to get hurt. The dynamic the two end up forming is one I like quite a bit, and only seems it could get better in future seasons. It also has a pretty unexpected yet solid episode on grief and dealing with parental loss.
A lot of dynamics between Rei and Claire are kind of muddied by the whole is this a problematic age gap by proxy kind of thing for sure, but I'd actually argue that while those vibes do make it a bit hard to work with a vibe like this long term, I'd say this makes the overall relationship between Claire and Rei to be one that walks the tightrope of genuinely heartwarming and also a chaotic disaster, which makes some of the most great comedy spots all throughout. In essence, their relationship is the best distillation of the entire series vibe all throughout. I feel it prudent to say that it has a lot going for it in the later installments past where the anime showcases it. For now, anyway, we could see it expanded given the run of Villainess has gotten a lot more under its belt since the initial 2023 anime has aired.
Of course, for the good that appears, there is still some bad to talk about. There is an incestual couple in the show, and Rei in the same sentence says that incest is just like homosexuality since it's forbidden love, which, like, yeah, I'm sure both of these are very taboo in the world of Revolution, but comparing being a lesbian to wanting to marry your sibling, maybe not something that's meant to be said. Clearly some internalized homophobia is coming out on Rei's part, since that is a constant inner conflict she has, but it still felt whack as fuck. I like the music in the show. It gives off a fun medieval vibe, but the animation is ridiculously lackluster. It's passable towards the start, but it teeters off as the season progresses and gets very slideshow-like at the end. The magic system is kind of whatever, you know, it's just your standard isekai magic, and the magic school is like every other magic school in an isekai anime. The secondary cast is kind of interesting. I do enjoy the three princes. Manaria is a good way to bring out Rei's internal conflicts. Lene is cool, but then gets ruined for reasons that I can't explain. And Misha is an okay best friend. A lot of the cast is undercooked because the main focus in this season is on Rei and Claire, which is fine since it's a show about their relationship. Of course, there's a lot of potential to develop further because it seems like the source material is pretty interesting and extensive, but we'll just have to wait and see.
If you do have some problems similar in nature to what Hunter has brought up, it can be easy to disregard a series like this for that kind of reason, but I'd personally like to argue that the internalized homophobia is an unfortunate real-life nature that a lot of queers do go through when trying to go for their true feelings over time. It's whack, sure, but it's an unfortunate truth that I'm glad this series doesn't stray away from simply to just go for the obvious lesbian relationship to happen sooner. The story does 100% get better in the expanded material in the light novel, plus the spin-off material, and the still ongoing manga, which I'd personally recommend if this even intrigued you a little bit with its premise. As while the anime by Platinum End is a good introduction, the overall original product it came from doesn't shy away from any of the stuff I mentioned above, and hell, might even double down on some of the good stuff from time to time.
While there are certainly some pretty whack aspects to this show, whether it be the animation or the incest, I gotta say, a lot of it is really great. I think if you can manage to look past the incest stuff because it takes place in a medieval timeline, and if you can kind of get past being a mental gap, it's great. It's a genuinely really good show. I would give I'm in Love with the Villainess a 7 out of 10. And one of the last shows we watched this year is Kazuki, Enta, and the new kid in town, Toi, all carry secrets in boxes of theirs. Although they are all connected to some degree, that connection goes to the next level when they accidentally break a Kappa statue, bringing Keppe, the prince of the lost Kappa kingdom, to the current age and day. In a fit of anger, he extracts their Shirikodama, turning them into Kappas, with the only way they can become human again being to defeat Kappa zombies by extracting their Shirikodama. Naturally, they become humans again, and are told by Keppe that through defeating Kappa zombies, he can create dishes that will grant their wishes. So long as they have wishes to grant, they are more than welcome to continue the fight. Along the way, they are challenged with whether or not they want to keep their secrets in their boxes, or if they want to open them up to the world and to truly connect with each other. Sounds like a pretty insane premise, right? Well, it all gets more insane once you figure out what on earth Shirikodama is. In Japanese mythology, the Shirikodama is a mythical orb right inside the butthole of a person, which contains not only their souls, but that person's desires. Although I'm no expert on Kappas, in mythology they are said to desire this orb for some reason. In the lore of Sarazanmai, the Shirikodama is wanted to restore balance to the world after a Kappa zombie attack, which is a result of the meddling otter empire. While we may nowadays perceive otters as just sweet little guys, in Japanese folklore they are often supernatural beings, and who would fool people like tanuki or kitsunes. That probably sounds even more insane, right? It should come as no surprise that this anime is written and directed by none other than the iconic Kunihiko Ikuhara, the visionary behind a bulk of Sailor Moon, Revolutionary Girl Utena, and Yuri Kuma Arashi. Because of how much I liked Yuri Kuma and Utena in last year's video, people were quick to point me to Sarazanmai for this year's video, and I'm so happy that I did go and watch it. Sarazanmai seems to be debated in what it means by everyone that views it, and for me, it seems to talk about the societal image of masculinity and how important the connection is between people.
As has been mentioned previously by myself and Hunter, this is made by the same writer behind queer classics like Utena, Sailor Moon S and Super S, and especially Yuri Kuma Arashi. Immediately off the bat, that should let you know the kind of vibe you're going to be in for, as Kunihiko Ikuhara has shown that even as a, allegedly, straight cis man, he is absolutely for the queers. But Sarazanmai actually takes something from his other works a lot of people seem to brush aside in regards to focusing on his queer writing. That being how he's able to make stories about connections with those around you, as Hunter is alluding to before, of which a main example can be found in the likes of Moaru Penguin Drum, as its core theming surrounds fate for sure, but it also regards to the connections you make in life. Sarazanmai, I'd argue, takes that sense of theming and grounds it to such a degree where, while you can still read the same level of Ikuhara-style wackiness within its collected story, it reads like Ikuhara wanting to be able to bring more of a story that the watcher can relate to more than just being a story of empowerment.
Kazuki, our main character, wants to connect with his younger brother Haruka because of something he feels responsible for. However, he doesn't really know how to connect with him. To try and form a connection, he cross-dresses as the idol Sara Azuma and goes around town to take selfies with her lottery advice given out every morning, sending them to Haruka to make him happy. Even though he'd go through the extra effort to cross-dress around town and some other wild things, when it comes to actually communicating with Haruka, he's extremely cold and distant. His hurdle through the show is trying to figure out how to connect with Haruka in a healthy way, and later on it's how he can connect with other protagonists of the show, Toi and Enta. Toi struggles to connect with his brother, Chikai, but for a pretty good reason. Chikai is a member of the Yakuza who has gotten his hands dirty quite a few times. He also has an unhealthy way of viewing the world that he pushes onto Toi many times, like bad people are the ones who survive in the world. He's often always away from home because of this, and Toi is willing to give up a lot to be able to be by his side despite all of the harm he brings. This ends up with him getting roped in turn into very bad things like his brother does, and he has to juggle this desire to connect with his brother over wanting to stay with his friends. And the last member of the protagonists, Enta, wants to connect with Kazuki. You see, Enta is actually in love with him, but he isn't sure how to express it or get Kazuki to realize how he feels. Even when he goes out of his way to do something obviously romantic, Kazuki interprets it as something just a close friend would do. His struggles in the show involve him trying to understand just how he feels about Kazuki and learning to deal with another person like Toi being in his life, along with the feelings that come with it: uncertainty, anger, and jealousy.
Character work like this has always been Ikuhara's bread and butter for the most part. See the relationship dynamic between Utena and Amphi and revolutionary girl Utena, and the extended family dynamic of Shoma, Kanba, Himari, and to an extent Ringo as well in Penguin Drama over time. Except where all of those are linked up in layers upon layers of trauma, generational or otherwise, the relationships our cast of boys is one that's more normal, for Ikuhara anyway. One could easily look at the complex feelings surrounding Enta's want to be closer to Kazuki due to feelings of semi-unrequited love, and immediately think back to, my case anyway, to people that they knew in their own lives who more or less were unable to really spit out their feelings on those that they love for differing reasons, more often than not due to queer phobia around them, or fear of rejection for the person that they love because they weren't interested in them as much. Then you have the dynamic of Ryo and Mabu, the two cops in the series who seem to have an interesting dynamic within them as well as the older mains of our cast. Most of what can be said about them is spoiler territory, however, and serves as one of the most heart-wrenching aspects surrounding the story of Sarazanmai, but all I will say is that while it is easy to write off as being cops and the main antagonists, in a sense of this story, their whole dynamic is one of the more highlights of, I would argue, of this entire plot as a whole. And I would argue it makes for such... it's hard for me to explain. I would argue that you just watch Sarazanmai in order to properly understand it.
These themes are of course also demonstrated through the aforementioned Haruka, who despite being a boy is very in love with feminine colors and looks up to an idol, not something a societal young man should be doing normally. Or the aforementioned Chikai, who asserts his idea of masculinity as a way to stay alive in a world he believes is against everyone, and ends up being a good image of what toxic masculinity looks like. Or you could look at Ryo and Mabu, two police officers and lovebirds in the series that act as antagonists. They let people enact their desires, bringing them to the surface and turning them into monsters, but the irony is that the two of them have heavily repressed desires of their own.
I'd personally argue that their relationship is the other side of the relationships that we see between the main group we follow, but especially Enta and Kazuki, and kind of operate as a foil to how their own may potentially end up over time, as their own relationship appears to be one which has since died out, or they are repressing their own desires for one another, to an extent anyway, taking it out on our main group by enacting zombies which act as their main source of enemies throughout the series. One could even argue that the dynamic they have with them is taking out their own internalized feelings of their buried feelings for each other out on those around them, instead of coming to terms with facing the truth of them. But the reason behind it is much more complicated, and really, it's one that bears me saying you should 100% watch this for yourself to understand how truly layered it is.
The series starts off with a kind of Monster of the Week formula, which I found personally very fun. Each of the creatures, if you can call them that, are all very fun gags in some form that reasonably tie back to the overarching story in some capacity. About halfway through the show, it breaks away from this formula to be able to dive deeper into the characters' desires, secrets, and longings for connection.
In a way, I'd personally liken the story direction in regards to another series with similar concepts and possible queer theming to it in Flip Flappers, where the series takes a more Monster of the Week, gotta collect all the MacGuffins plot, and around the halfway part it begins to supplement it for kind of the same story beats as what we get here with Sarazanmai. Except in a roundabout way with potentially weird parental Yuri undertones, but that's maybe something we may have to come across next year because Flip Flappers does have some of that good old gay shit involved there as well. So who could say, really? Point being here is that Sarazanmai's subversion of breaking away from the standard formula is, once again, another massive Ikuhara trope, showing he hasn't fully let go of all of his quirkiness in his older age. He is finally showing some level of restraint, so at least we can give him that for the moment.
I think the themes tackled in the show are ones people can really relate to, especially now. I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times before, but we live in a time where we're more connected as a species than ever before, but we could not be less connected on a personal level. Many people are depressed or feel isolated in a phenomenon that has now been dubbed the loneliness epidemic. Just like the characters in the show yearn to connect with one another, we all yearn to connect with the people around us. I've been in college now for a little while, and every single class I go into, every single person is on their phone in there. No one will ever even look up to talk with each other, and in class, no one says anything, and then when the class is over, we just get up and go on with our days. No connections are formed at all, despite probably everyone in there really wanting to talk to the person next to them. While I wouldn't advise turning into a kappa and hunting zombies down, I will say the show gives us many solutions on how to fix our loneliness, one of which being the ability to be vulnerable with those around us. We are all going through something to some capacity. Every single one of us. It could be something small, like, oh no, my shoe's broken. Or it could be something big, like financials or loss of people. So we should all be open about it, embrace those that need it, and learn to love each other again instead of doom scrolling or trying to forge an identity of yourself on Instagram that just isn't you. Let's connect. Themes and plot aside, the rest of the show is phenomenal. To accompany the absurd premise are even more absurd sequences aided by some great mappa animation, bringing in great visual gags or genuinely amazing Sakuga moments. Some of the absurd moments revolve around what are nothing less of a dude's version of a magical girl transformation, where they get eaten by Keppei while he does a weird little dance. He sucks out their Shirikodama and then bam, they're a kappa now. When they're extracting the Shirikodama, I don't think I can say exactly why, because it might get me demonetized, but it looks like a certain object that's known for pleasuring someone's butthole. There are some cool references to other media, like moments with the officers feel like they could be a callback to Utena, and moments with the idol Sarah are references to like Castle in the Sky or the film E.T. Some of these absurd moments are musical numbers, like the officers have a dance number for the first half of the series that is ridiculously catchy. It was stuck in my head for weeks. When our trio of boys go to stop a Kappa zombie, they have their own dance number that highlights their fight to hold their secrets but long for connections at the same time. That is also ridiculously catchy, and I catch myself doing their little dance and singing that song to myself. I mean, even the opening is a great song from Kanabun, the group behind Silhouette from Naruto. Song of the Dead from Zom 100. And Star Maker from My Hero Academia. And the ending song is from the Peggies, the group behind Kimi no Se from Bunny Girl Senpai. Centimeter from Ren and Girlfriend. Ew. Gross. Hate that series. And Ashito from My Hero Academia. Sarazanmai is weird, it's funny, it's sweet, it's emotional, and it's just fantastic. I feel it's rare to find an anime these days that's truly original and has something to say that could be meaningful to so many people, and this show absolutely fits that bill. It won't be for everybody. Some of the segments in it are just so absurd and over the top that I'm sure people will just clock out and go watch something else. But for those that do like it, you will love it. Ikuhara, you cooked once again, and I hope to God that they let you cook again sometime, because you just continually deliver some of my favorite pieces of animation ever. I'll be giving Sarazanmai a 10 out of 10. Please go watch this show. And the last new show I watched this year was Yuri Is My Job. Hime Shiraki is beloved by all around her for her friendliness, her innocent personality, and her overall cute presentation. However, how she presents herself is all focused around what she calls her facade, an act she puts on to one day marry someone who is rich. While zoning out, she falls down the stairs and knocks someone over, injuring Mai Koshiba. Since Hime was the cause of the injury, she takes up Mai's role for the day as a worker in Cafe Libre, a maid cafe-like establishment, with the theme being an all-girls academy. Although it turns out Mai is actually the manager of the cafe, and Hime is such a hit with the customers that Mai wants her to take over for her while she recovers from her injuries. Will Hime's facade hold up in the cafe, or will its cracks show itself, leading the truth to come out?
We've seen a lot of anime do the false personality at work, having to balance their social status outside the job kind of vibe. See Wotakoi as a bigger recent example of this. Hell, it may be one of the most safest tropes in modern anime to fall back on in recent times, but in the case of Yuri Is My Job, I'd argue that at least it takes the premise in a direction that allows it some more uniqueness, I suppose, within the realm of Yuri.
I would agree with Chloe, as Mimon, the mangaka for the series, is no stranger to Yuri's as she has written 4 others before this. With Yuri as My Job, she is able to create 2 unique worlds within the same series, the normal life and the cafe environment. All of the cafe environment at first for Hime is perfect, since it's just putting on an act for her customers, something she's very familiar with. It also acts as a way to bring in typical Yuri tropes to satisfy the customers, but also to put under a lens by the staff, as Hime tends to be critical of them. The cafe environment gets rustled up once Hime and her coworker Yano realize they have a complicated relationship that roots from their childhoods, and Hime's best friend Kanako comes to work at Lieb because she's in love with Hime. After this, these Yuri tropes are put to the test as real feelings complicate the interactions between their characters. On the flip side, outside of the cafe, there are some pretty complicated relationships, as you may have guessed. As I mentioned, Yano and Hime have a complicated backstory, made further complicated because Yano is in love with Hime, and it's very possible Hime may be in love with Yano. We also have Kanako, who again is in love with Hime, and while that initially may not seem too bad, it manifests itself in pretty intense jealousy towards Yano that conflicts with the work environment and bleeds outside of it. Kanako's feelings are found out by Chibana, another one of their coworkers, which makes things even more complicated.
This is one particular trope of possible love triangle. The already complicated work environment dynamic is presented in a way that I feel, in a way, kind of feels like it would give characters like Hime, Mitsuki, and to a degree Kanako, a way of being able to be presented as genuinely well-meaning characters, if a bit traumatized from past experiences. Instead, while it does make the series much more interesting to watch from episode to episode, it unfortunately can be a miserable experience if you are really wanting Mitsuki to pick one particular girl over the other, Team Edward versus Team Jacob style, or if you're just not fussed and wanting Mitsuki to not be in agony over who she wants to be in love with over time. Yuri is My Job, to that end in the anime at least, can be a bit of a miserable emotional rollercoaster ride in that regard. But if you don't mind a good bit of that from episode to episode with the complicated character dynamics, this may be the show for you.
I think the comparison to Team Edward versus Team Jacob is really funny. But because of these elaborate relationships, conversations between them all is crucial, and thankfully the dialogue is extremely engaging. Even though the place they have these conversations isn't too crazy, it's like the kitchen, the balcony outside of their cafe, and McDonald's, it is very hard to not be completely invested in what the characters are talking about. Revelations about characters and their motivations are revealed subtly by body language and their conversations with another member of the cast. Miscommunications are formed that further develop relationships, or in Hime's case, help her realize that she can be more honest with people instead of trying to keep up this act. It helps that the performances given from their voice actresses elevate these conversations even higher. If you can't tell, I think the dialogue and character interactions in the show is definitely the highlight of it, especially as a writer.
As someone who's followed the series in its manga format up until recent, with a fair chunk of the first third of the series being the main adaptation points for this anime, I will say that the series does get better from where the anime itself leaves off, giving me hope that perhaps the series will maybe get a second season by Passione down the line, especially given that the series goes a lot more in depth into the dynamics of the main group, as well as adding more characters not explored into the mix as well, which both make things a lot more interesting than the initial run of the series did, but also kind of make things a bit more fucked up. Not gonna elaborate on that for many different reasons, but if you like where the anime left off, 100% check out the manga if you have the ability to do so. This series is absolutely worth it.
I probably will end up checking out the manga myself, especially since Chloe thinks so highly of it. I was pretty interested throughout the whole runtime of the show, but I'll admit the last episode felt pretty weak, as a season ender, especially since we have no further announcements for a season 2. Don't get it twisted though. Again, I did enjoy myself with the series, and I found it a very solid watch. I'll give Yuri Is My Job a solid 7 out of 10, and I'll be starting that manga very shortly. But that's as far as it goes for new shows. 20 anime watched in the span of 2 months. Goodness gracious. We do have one little segment that I'd like to finish off this video, and that is what I've dubbed the bonus segment, where I'll watch some of the continuations from last year's video. First up for the bonus segment, I watched The Given movie. Continuing after the TV show of the season, the film focuses much more on the relationship between Haruki Nakayama and Akihiko Kaiji, the college students in the band with Mafuyu and Ritsuka. Haruki, despite being one of the focal points of the film, isn't given the most amount of attention, as a lot of the story is between the falling apart relationship of Akihiko and the prodigy violinist Ugetsu Murata. We learned that for years now, presumably, something happened between Akihiko and his family. He moved in with Ugetsu, and they haven't had the best relationship. They are the type of couple that breaks up, gets back together, breaks up, gets back together, and so on and so forth. It seems even when they aren't together, they will still live together because Akihiko has nowhere else he can go. When they are struggling, he engages in prostitution so that he can have a place to sleep for the night. Due to this, he seems to be morbidly depressed and very disconnected with reality, explaining his very monotone and distant behavior. Much of the film is dedicated to him exploring his complicated relationship with Ugetsu and his developing relationship with Haruki. Ugetsu Murata is a pretty interesting character that should probably have gotten more screen time. The only time that he feels he could be himself is when he's performing, and he's hopelessly aware that he has a tendency for self-destruction. He has to choose between Akihiko and music. And while at the start of the relationship that choice was clearly Akihiko, as it has progressed, he realized he loved music much more. Even though he realizes that, he still loves both of these parts of his life and wants both of these things in his life. But sometimes that isn't reasonable or possible. Even though he loves Akihiko, he has a constant conflict of not wanting him to leave his life while also wanting Akihiko to leave. He doesn't know how to express it in a way that is healthy, and instead of ending it himself, he slowly waits for Akihiko to end the relationship for him. I think many people can relate to the relationship that these two had, as many people have been in a relationship like this at least once in their life, where you know you're the bad guy, or you wait for your partner to end things for you. At the end of the movie, it's clear that despite all of his internal conflicts, Akihiko finally ending things really hurts Ugetsu, but he knows that this is the right thing for the both of them. I think that that is so perfectly human. Something super unexpected, which happens around 20 minutes into the film, and is the reason there is a content warning for this. There's a very graphic assault scene between Haruki and a drunk Akihiko. Haruki is asking Akihiko to stop, is clearly uncomfortable, is kicking and pushing him away, but none of this deters Akihiko. He does eventually come to his senses, stops and apologizes, but obviously this goes way too far in the moment. Honestly, it really baffled me that this was included in the series at all. Akihiko obviously has a very complicated relationship with sex and love that's explored in the movie, and you could try to explain that Akihiko believes sex is how he keeps people in his life or uses it as a measure of exchange for a place to sleep for the night, which is, in fact, something he needs in this moment. He has been a prostitute presumably for years. By this point in time, he doesn't know any better and is probably really desensitized to sexual acts. However, even if he has a complicated relationship with sex, that doesn't change that the scene is a super bold inclusion, especially since it's made clear to us that Akihiko does this because he's angry. Haruki clearly doesn't want this. He expresses he didn't want this, so consent was not given. Yet for how much that it is expressed Haruki doesn't want this, Akihiko goes through with the action. What makes this more complicated is that afterwards, Haruki clarifies that by him saying he'd do anything right before this happened, that was him giving consent, even though he looked super uncomfortable and was trying to force Aki off of him by hitting and kicking him. Akihiko apologizes a lot, with Haruki accepting the apology, so it makes all of this even more gray and weird. I think this is just one of those things that people will have to watch and decide whether they like it for themselves. Me personally, I think it takes a series that seemed to have good intentions in the first season regarding mental health and kind of puts it into turmoil with this, again, very odd inclusion in the movie. It makes it to where viewers might not be able to trust its intentions going forwards. After it happens, Haruki is naturally upset about it and it leads into the next few minutes of the film, but he seemingly moves past it pretty quickly. Akihiko starts living at his place, they are shown walking together, bonding together, him making meals for him and such. It all just feels odd. Many fans don't seem to like this film, and I personally don't know how to feel about it. I'm not sure something as touchy as assault should be the inciting incident for a romance between two people. Going into this, I was hoping to get some more expansions to Mifuyu and Ritsuka's relationship, and while we did get some of that, they remained mostly in the background. I think that's okay though, because it kept the energy that the show left off of, and also gave some slight closure to some of my grievances with the original series. The ending song was decent, but I don't think it held the same emotional weight that Mifuyu's first song did at the end of the original season. I gave the first season of Given an 8 last year, but retroactively, I feel maybe a 9 might be more appropriate. I'm not entirely sure though just yet. What I am sure of is that I am pretty conflicted about this movie. Again, given that the inciting incident for a relationship in this film is an assault scene. I think that Akihiko's complicated relationship with sex and depression could have been explored in a different way, or that maybe this moment would have been treated more seriously than it was, instead of kind of being swept under the rug as the movie progressed. But because of this and the overall quality drop in the writing, I will be giving the given movie a 4 out of 10. Like I said, I think this movie is one that will be perceived and evaluated differently by everyone who watches it because of what it contains. It is controversial, and you know, I said it earlier in the video, guys, but we really should try to stray away as a society from putting assault scenes in any type of media just purely for shock factor. I would say that it did more than that, but this movie really didn't. It kind of was just forgotten about super quickly, and I don't think that's realistic based off of what happened to him. I also watched the Sasaki and Miyano graduation film, as well as Hirano to Kaguya, since it's the intro for the film. My anime list marks them as 2 different anime, but I'm not going to do that because Hirano to Kaguya is only 8 minutes and hardly dives into it much at all, although it was cute. What can I say? You know, it was enjoyable. We could be seeing more from these 2 in the future since the manga is still ongoing, so there's gotta be a fair amount of source material still that can be covered. As for the graduation movie, it continues where the anime left off and adapted all the way up to their graduation. I'm not sure if the manga continues past this point, but according to the internet, this is also still publishing, so it may be ongoing still. The movie showcases the romance as it continues to blossom in a healthy, slow-paced way. There's no weird stuff or fetish content here. It even has the 2 of them coming out to their families. There isn't anything super deep or profound to say outside of it being wholesome. It feels good, and it's a great continuation of the series in every single way. You know, you're coming here to watch them graduate, you're gonna see them graduate. Just like season 1, I'll be giving the movie an 8 out of 10. And with that, the Pride video for this year comes to an end. What a ride. This year, instead of actively trying to find shows that might not be very good, I went for shows with a strictly good reputation, and I gotta say, that was probably the right move. This has been a lot of fun compared to last year's video, and I found a myriad of new shows that I really like. Hell, while working on this video, and since it has been months since it was written and parts of it have been edited, I fully caught up with the Blue Period manga, and I finished Land of the Lustrous. Julia and I are planning to watch Madoka's Rebellion movie as soon as this video has gone live, and I'm sure there are going to be other series from here that I go and continue on my free time. I want to give a massive thank you to Chloe for being a part of this video. I asked her to do something insane. Truly insane, and she not only followed through with watching 20 shows alongside me, but she gave some amazing insight to things that I never would have been able to do on my own, or never even would have known, like the stuff with Lily from Zombieland Saga. Who would have known that an anime would be brought up in a serious court trial? If you haven't already, please go check out her channel. She has some amazing videos, and she's only going to continue to upload more amazing ones. Not going to her channel would be a massive disservice to your media literacy, and thank you again, Chloe, for being patient, because this video took way too long to be worked on.
Aw, you're too kind there, Hunter. I'm just doing my best here as like a massive autistic gal who's just really trying her best, you know? So, yeah, if you like the points that I've brought up in this video, definitely do check out my channel. I talk about a whole host of different anime, not just queer stuff, and I'm looking at talking about more recent stuff as well. I'm even going to be talking about seasonal anime soon, so if you want my takes on that sort of stuff, definitely check out what I have to offer on my channel. And again, thank you so much, Hunter, for bringing me on board for this. This has been a very lovely experience, and thank you all for listening in to me.
Last year, I made a tier list at the end of the video, so I'll be doing it again. Here's the tier list for this year's video for overall score, and here is it combined with last year's video to see how all the new shows measure up. Thank you all so much for watching, and to the dedicated viewers of the channel that follow my sporadic and spontaneous upload schedule. Even though I don't have a Patreon anymore, I still want to give a massive thank you to Jim, Bandy, Juliet, Augie, Ray, and Joshua. With that, I will see you guys next time. Meow.